Are we on? Yes. Okay. All right, guys, we're on TV tonight. This is going to be the first edition of the TEC meeting that's going to be televised. So we're happy about that. And I want to welcome everybody in the crowd and my commission, and Happy New Year to everybody. And let's get going here. So I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. Lori, can you call the roll, please?
Chairwoman Thompson.
Here.
Vice Chairman Myjack.
Here.
Member Yount.
Here.
Member Tucker. Member Perez.
Here.
Member Delgado.
Here.
Member Fliss.
Here.
Alternate Member Young.
Here.
All right, so we have a quorum. So can everybody stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I'd like to change the order of the agenda with you guys' approval. There's a lot of people in the audience that have come tonight to talk about the tree list. And we even have a member of the Planning and Zoning Board. And I'd like to go ahead with, and we'll vote on it, so it's up to y'all. But I'd like to move item 8C up and have it follow item 5A. So take a look at your agendas, make sure you're okay with that. And then, is this like an opinion thing, or is this a roll call vote?
Chairwoman, you could get a general consensus.
Okay, all right. Well, does anybody have a problem with moving item 8C to follow item 5A? I see no lights, I see no heads nodding. All right, so we're going to go into 5A right now, the approval of the minutes. Does anybody have anything to say about the minutes?
I moved to approve the minutes a long time ago, but they're there, October 11th.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, so the motion was made by Member Perez and seconded by Member Fliss. I do have a question, a clarification. It is under petitions and requests from the public president, the second paragraph. I'm not exactly sure. It says Chairwoman Thompson stated that Mr. Johnston would just for the fountains in stormwater ponds or park ponds be turned off if there's a confirmed sewage spill in the ponds. And I'm not sure that that sentence makes sense the way it's worded. I'm not sure what it's supposed to say. Lori?
I can re-listen to the video.
Okay.
Yep.
That'd be good. I don't see any reason to change it. I mean, I see what the intent is, but it just doesn't make sense. The middle of the sentence doesn't make sense. So if you can make that correction, that'd be good. All right, so all those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, seeing none, we're going to move right into item 8C. Eddie, would you like to start us off?
Yes, thank you, Chairwoman, and good evening, Commissioners. Before I begin on this item, I just wanted to introduce our new senior planner. This is Christy Anderson. Wanted to give her a chance to meet you all, the Environmental Commission. And actually, Christy's been on with us for a couple months now, so this is just the first opportunity we've had to bring her to introduce her to you all.
It's nice to meet you. Happy to be here.
Okay, item C, 8C. In October of 2022, the City Council approved the TEC's recommendation to replace the Landscaping Technical Manual tree list with the IFAS Native Keystone Species List. Council directed staff to take the TEC's recommendation and incorporate it into the current tree list in the city's technical manual. Council desired not to replace the current tree list in the city's technical manual, however, to incorporate the TEC's recommendation to modify the current tree list. In June of 2023, the city's consultant, Kimley Horn, presented the updated landscape technical manual to the TEC, and the TEC recommended approval. On January 3rd, 2024, the Planning and Zoning Commission requested the ordinance be sent back to the TEC for further input on increasing the number of native species and to consider the species in neighboring hardiness zones. On January 9th, last night, City Council held the first reading of this ordinance, and this item is scheduled for public hearing at City Council on January 23rd.
Thank you, Eddie. Well, wasn't able to actually watch the video, but I listened to the audio from the P&Z meeting. I also went back and listened to the audio of the June 2023 TEC meeting, and it seems like there's some, a lot of discussion about this, this tree thing. Guess the first thing we should do is probably call the cards from the public first. Let's do that.
Kay St. Ange.
Yes, I'm Kay St. Ange, Maryland Avenue, Titusville. Tonight, you've been presented with the Landscape Tech Manual Ordinance with an amended list of recommended trees and plants for landscapers. This amended list has 315 trees or plants. 115 of trees and plants are native. 200 trees and plants are non-native, mostly Florida-friendly. That makes 36% of the amended list native. Last night, I rechecked all my numbers and admit to some mistakes, which I have corrected, and that's why I did this show and tell poster, so you have the corrected numbers. On October 25, Council directed staff to take TEC's recommendation of the University of Florida IFAS Native Keystone Species List and incorporate it into the current tree list in the tech manual, as Eddie has said. In fact, the ordinance itself says Council desires to amend the tech manual to update the approved tree and shrub list by incorporating the Keystone Species List and including Florida-friendly species. Incorporate means include. Yet, 86 native plants and trees on the Keystone Species List were not included in the amended list in the proposed Landscape Tech Manual Ordinance. 86. There are only 101 trees and plants on the Keystone Species List, and 86 were excluded. I don't consider that incorporating something. If you're cooking and you incorporate something, you incorporate the whole thing, or otherwise you get the wrong recipe. Only 15 of the Keystone Species List were incorporated into the current tree list. If all of the 101 trees and plants on the Keystone Species were included in the proposed ordinance, the amended list would contain 201 native plants out of a total of 315. That makes 63% of the plants, trees would be native. So Council directed the entire Keystone Species. That's what incorporate means. But that's not what happened. The native Keystone Species are chosen because these native trees and plants support native bees or provide caterpillars for birds. Baby birds need to eat a lot of caterpillars. As we all know, 30% of birds have disappeared in the U.S. since the 1970s. So if we don't provide native trees and plants, the bird population will continue to be depleted. Native trees support native bugs that support native birds. It's just that simple. Most of the 200 non-native plants on the amended list are Florida-friendly plants, meaning they are suited for our area. But just because the plant or tree will live in our area does not mean it provides food for wildlife as do native plants. Of the 200 non-native plants, Florida-friendly plants, only 48 attract either birds, hummingbirds, or butterflies per their website. I have a list of these trees, the 48 that the website says attracts birds, hummingbirds, or butterflies. It doesn't mention caterpillars at all, so who knows? I would like to suggest that TEC recommend the entirety, that's 101, of the keystone species be incorporated in the Landscape Tech Manual's ordinance amended list. This would involve adding in the 86 native plants excluded, which I provided to you. This would increase the percentage of native trees from 36 to 63 and the rest Florida-friendly plants. P&Z recommended that the Landscape Tech Manual ordinance be sent back to TEC for further input. P&Z indicated they wanted a higher percentage of native plants in the amended list, so this suggestion that I'm making would resolve that. P&Z also suggested that incentives be included in the proposed Landscape Tech Manual ordinance to encourage developers to plant native plants. Brad Parrish told council last night that providing incentives to plant native plants is beyond the scope of this project. Nevertheless, incentives could be recommended for a future project. The Landscape Tech Manual's list is just recommendations. There is no means in the land development regulations to ensure that landscapers utilize any native plants whatsoever. Section 3321 indicates the applicant is encouraged to utilize plant material native to Brevard County in meeting landscape requirements. I provided you a list of 9 trees and plants from the proposed ordinance that are not suited for hardiness zone 9B and 10A. I have one more sentence.
How much? Sure, go ahead.
Okay. Yes, some of those are native, but they're not suited for our area. We're told that we're now 10A, so everything I did, I based it on 9B or 10A just to give a little bit of fudge room. You might recommend that those trees be eliminated from the amended list in the ordinance. So thank you very much for giving these suggestions your consideration. Do you have any questions? Okay, thank you. All righty.
Thank you, Kay. Next
Tony
card.
Schifolo.
Schifolo, Historic Norwood House. Obfuscation. 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 I often stand before you as a cheerleader for advisory boards exercising their givens and their wanna-do for the citizens. You are, after all, the voice of the citizens for the environment, as well as the environment itself, which state law prohibits from having a voice. I often encourage you to be in the room when your relevant issues come before council. Often staff obfuscates when presenting your issues to council, and that means to intentionally mislead and misdirect in order to kind of cause confusion. And this happened last evening in council meeting when staff was pressed by member Stokel, who sits over here where this guy's not paying attention right now, on the list approved by TEC versus the list presented to council via the hired Kimley Horn consultant. A list found unacceptable by both TEC and the citizens who studied the list, the geography of North Brevard, the probability of successful maturity of these plants, and the usefulness of native plants. So this love affair that the city staff has with Kimley Horn has to stop. The consultants from this Orlando branch of the firm have neither the interest in nor the knowledge about the area and its residents, and you guys keep listening to them. I don't know why. Why does staff always present the consultant's vision to council instead of the direct recommendations of its advisory boards? And then they obfuscate the process to council like Brad did last night. If you listen to his testimony, you'll see that he left Sarah Stokel thinking that you guys looked at the list, approved the consultant's inclusion of non-native and non-Florida friendly plants and eliminating many of the plants on the list that you approved. And then he let Sarah Stokel sit there and think that that was the process, that you guys had looked at it and approved it after the consultant had made all these changes. I am really upset with Kimley Horn because their vision for tomorrow, I'm going to vent now. Their vision for tomorrow for West Titusville is a nightmare. And if you will look at all the things that they have presented before council, time after time after time, whether it's a concurrency test for the west 7.5 acres on Tropic Street, where they said that only 1 or 2 cars per hour after 80 apartments were built would make a difference on Tropic Street. You know, they're just not with us. They are not people, they are not consultants who consider what is going on in Titusville, what the citizens are saying. Staff listens to us, and then you go and you listen to the consultants and you write in what they have to say. And that's what happened to TEC. You guys were totally thrown under the bus by city staff last night.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next card.
I apologize.
Kimberly Gibbs.
I have some show and tell, so. This is my first time here, and I wasn't sure what the room would look like, so, okay, here I go. My name's Kim Gibbs. I live in North Merritt Island, and I'm here tonight as a native plant advocate for Brevard County. I'm also a member of the local Native Plant Society. So I just learned about all of this going on, and of course, as a native plant advocate, I wanted to pop on over here and share with you my experience with native plants and explain why it's so important to include them. I can see that there's just a little bit of discord on this particular issue and that there might be a lack of consensus. But that's okay, we're going to keep walking through this. So I want to tell you a little bit about my experience with living in Brevard County and my experience with native plants. We purchased our property about a little over 3 years ago, and we were fortunate to purchase a property that's about 4 acres. It has a stormwater pond and some wetlands. It's beautiful. What we soon learned was that it was full of Brazilian pepper, many other invasives. The water was full of blue-green algae. It looked very, very bad. And so over these past 3 years or so, we've spent hundreds of hours removing the Brazilian pepper and the invasives, restoring the native habitat there with native plants. The first thing we did was, turn off the irrigation, avoid the use of any pesticides, herbicides, and really start with a clean program of landscaping. Today, about 3 years later, we're on the path. It's a long path, but we have clean water in our storm water pond. We have big fish, all kinds of fish. We have an abundance of birds and pollinators. Actually, we have all kinds of animals. So I was hoping to show you some of these things. This is a picture that I just had handy. This is a polyphemus moth that I took a photo of last February, and you're not going to find a polyphemus under your non-native plants. You're going to find this in the oak leaf litter under your oak trees. It's the size of a handkerchief, and it's amazing. Gulf fritillary butterflies all over, and many other kinds of butterflies. I was hoping to show you, these are just some plants that I clipped from my yard today. Just an abundance of color. We've got beautyberry and some coreopsis and some other things there. Fantastic, low maintenance, not no maintenance, low maintenance plants that thrive here and support our native wildlife. This one has This is my acacia. It has an amazing fragrance. You can probably smell this from over there. They make French perfume with this amazing native plant. All of these plants are native. I was hoping to share these with you somehow, but I don't want to run out of time, and I still have another section to talk about. Here, do you want to put those in there? This is wax myrtle. Amazing. Everyone should have a wax myrtle in their yard somewhere. And a fiddlewood here. Okay, I don't want to run out of time. So what's this all about? Okay, conclusions, things I've learned over these past 3 years. Nature is resilient. Remove the invasives, plant the good stuff, and nature will heal itself. Plant what was there before. Native plant landscaping is complex. It's not as simple as just plunking a crepe myrtle, not a wax myrtle, crepe myrtles and arboricola in the ground. No, say no to those unless there's just no other alternative. And compare these native landscapes to some of the new development that doesn't have any native plants. They are sterile environments that are dead and that don't support any wildlife. Okay, so you've heard some of the benefits of native plants, conserving our resources, supporting wildlife, avoiding the negative impacts of introduced invasive species. Brazilian pepper and the Australian pine and eucalyptus, all of the list goes on. And the risk is not only of the plant itself, it's from insects that might be somehow attached to those exotic plants that are causing enormous environmental and economic damage, especially throughout Florida. Okay, so there's some problems with the list. Oh, can I, one sentence?
How much more time do you need?
2 sentences?
Give her 2 more minutes?
Oh, okay, I'll just summarize here. There's a few little problems with the IFAS list and the combined list and all those lists. First of all, the IFAS keystone species list that I saw, which I think it might be the same as yours, it doesn't include cabbage palms. Let me assure you that our sable palmetto, our state tree, our cabbage palm is in fact a keystone tree. And it's the only native palm tree here in Brevard County. Okay, so there does not seem to be consensus with the plan that is in front of you. And I question whether the members of the Florida Native Plant Society were consultant or if they were invited to assist, because you want to come up with a truly robust plan that you'll be able to use for years to come. So I would just humbly suggest that perhaps you take a pause, take a 1 month, a short time period. I'm saying 1 month. That seems like a manageable time period. Allow your stakeholders to come together and provide a consensus report. What does that mean? What's a consensus report? That's where all your stakeholders and your experts, the experts come together, they have meetings, they hash it out, and they provide a report that says, these are the plants that we all agreed upon, no problem. This is a second set of plants that we agree upon, but with some conditions or with some reservations. And then the third group of plants is we can't agree on those at all. So at least you have accurate, robust information to use to move forward. So that's just an idea that I would offer for your consideration, and I'd be happy to assist if I can. And thank you for taking on this issue. It's complex and it's important. Thank you.
Thank you. Next card.
Bill Klein.
Bill Klein, 3 Indian River Avenue. I have a question. Did you all approve the Kimley Horn list of plants? You directed them to put in the IFAS list of plants. Did you approve Kimley Horn's list? That's what I was told by the staff. I don't hear an answer.
I went back through the list of motions, Bill, and I was not present for the June 2023 meeting, but it was approved. Kimley Horn's list was approved at the June 2024 TEC meeting.
I'm sorry, I was misunderstood. I made comments last night saying you would not have approved it. I have to take those comments back. I want to state that the IFAS list was made specifically for Brevard County, nowhere else. The Kimley Horn list has plants that will not survive here. When you read in the literature on raising nature, it talks about having the plants and the animals that evolved together over centuries, not something new that came in. The insects, they're like the butterflies, they're little probuses that go down into the plant. They evolved with the plants. They cannot live on non-native plants. It has been shown that birds such as the chickadee, the one baby bird will eat 3,000 caterpillars. The parents will not build a nest in any area that has less than 70% of native plants because the chicks cannot survive. When I moved to Titusville, I came here because of the slogan, which no longer is true, gateway to nature. Titusville has destroyed so much of the native plants throughout this area. The bird population is disappearing. Amen. I used to go to Sandpoint Park, the Merritt Island Wildlife. I'd see all kinds of birds. They're going. Look at the manatees. They need clean water. How do you get clean water? You need trees that absorb the water and not polluted runoff running into the IRL. We have destroyed the manatees. We're destroying our nature throughout this area. I love to go windsurfing. I used to do it before I moved to Titusville. I won't go in that polluted mess that Titusville has made out of our river. You need native plants. I have seen many programs that show they use native plants around bodies of water to purify and keep the water clean. They don't need chlorine. They don't need bug spray. They don't need insecticides, herbicides to try to kill the polluted growth that grows when you destroy the native plants that support the birds and the bees that are in the area, the fish and the animals. Have you noticed that there are a lot less fish in the IRL? Could that be from the loss of native plants, the loss of mangroves? Over 90% of our mangroves have disappeared with the construction that's done here. Just recently, they built a new housing development down south of here called Tranquility. They destroyed 2 miles of native plants along the Indian River Lagoon, the shoreline protection that holds the sand and the soil together. They have allowed the pollution to run out as that gets there. It's just a disgrace. I think that you need to look at this list of native plants and say, not that we're going to suggest 1 or 2 somewhere in your property. We want 70% native plants on your property because we are the gateway to nature. Whoops, I made a mistake. We are no longer the gateway. We're the gateway to the sewage polluted lagoon. Thank you.
Next card, Lori.
Ted Garrod.
Good evening, members. My name's Ted Garrod, for the record, and I'm a member of the Planning and Zoning Commission, and my purpose of being here came from a quick observation of the proposed listing that occurred over the holiday weekend. So I admitted on the record that I wasn't able to determine specifically every single plant listed species. I kind of eyeballed those, which were canopy trees. And from my experience, so I can introduce where it is I came from, I've administered for 35 years public administration. I'm a certified planner with the American Institute of Certified Planners. I've overseen the development of environmental regulations in Martin County, Osceola County. I was a director overseeing the divisions that had environmental protection. My horticulturist on staff, because of that interface, I had a lot of experience, but I'm no expert. From my experience, I was able to kind of eyeball a few plants along the list, the trees specifically, that I didn't recognize being this area of Florida, let alone even Central Florida. So I went through the list, and I took that list and created 10, grabbed it, kind of a snapshot of the entire list. And of the entire listed trees, canopy trees, I found 10 of them were suspicious. When I went to each of those tree species for more information, I was able to determine that they, in fact, weren't trees I would suggest actually would grow here. And would grow here is the second hat I'm going to put on. The second hat is from public administration and a pragmatic approach. You don't want to require people to plant things that don't survive, because the result of that is enforcement of a code that says, but that has to survive, so you have to replant it. You put a burden on a developer when you require him to plant something that won't grow, passes, dies, and has to be replaced. Both a cost effectiveness, but also the fact that if once the developer leaves, these non-select species don't tolerate the area, 5 or 10 years later they die. I'll use an example I mentioned about laurel oaks. I'm all for laurel oaks. They're native species. They propagate here very well, but they're also, as I've received back some comments from the consultant that's here tonight, I think, that or at least the person who responded, that tree is the weaker of oak trees. It's not preferred. And I can say from experience, and that being more specific examples in the city of Orlando, requiring landscape trees in rights-of-way because people want to canopy shade the sidewalks, and I'm sure you're familiar with all the benefit of shaded asphalt. However, laurel oaks don't do well, and when they die, which they did, and they all got planted at the same time, the cost burden went to the city of Orlando to have to remove those trees, the sidewalks that were destroyed by the root zones, and I'm sure you've seen examples of this. So from an administrator's point of view, the wrong plants can create a burden, not just to the developer in the example I gave you, but it can be a burden to the community, the citizens, the taxpayers as we are, that you have to fund that replacement. And then certainly from a management standpoint, when you plant trees in subdivisions that don't grow, then they die, then some person owns the land, so then that becomes, as so oftentimes referred to, that's a code enforcement issue. So now you take somebody who had the wrong plant planted, which was required, the plant dies, and now it becomes a code enforcement subject for somebody. And you can see how this spirals into somewhat of a dissatisfactory situation. So my purpose tonight is to suggest to you that from my understanding, I've been on the P&Z for approximately a year. Outside of my experience, I would suggest that having adoption of ordinances and regulations from consultants is a good way of doing it. I've used them to develop rules. I've interfaced with Native Plant Society, with horticulturists on the private sector who want to try to add to the understanding of the ordinance adoption what's best suited for this particular area. I worked in the Kissimmee area. Kissimmee is not like Orlando, and Orlando is not like Titusville. Frankly, Titusville is not like all of Brevard County. There's a very specific type of microclimate that exists here because of, in all due respect, the Indian River Lagoon, even in bad health, environmentally affects this area, the growth, the plant species. Of the list I had of 10, 40% of that list, 4 out of 10, were confirmed not to be suitable for this area, or in fact cannot grow here. So my point in closing is it would be, I think, best suited, slow down, kind of like NASA just announced Artemis 1 and 2 are going to be delayed. Go back and go down that list specifically for that tolerance level for every tree, every plant, to make sure you haven't grabbed everything in a categorical list produced by IFAS. Secondly, interface it with, as been suggested, native plants, and try to look at the incentivization program.
How much more time do you need, Ted?
1 minute.
Go ahead.
Thank you. The summary of my experience is where I'm headed to say, I watched a community develop at first blush a tree protection ordinance, then it expanded that into a landscaping code. Then it revised the landscaping code to incorporate native plants. Then they revised that landscaping code to incorporate incentivization so that developers were going to have a benefit if they chose native plants. The community gets the benefit. They don't die. They're tolerant. And quite frankly, the environmental benefits, goes without saying, has already been expressed by people far more an expert than me. So if it would be best suited, as I recommended, it be sent back to TEC to look at this more specifically, drill down, come back with a valid list of plants that are those you accept, and go both to the landscaping ornamental plants, but also the tree, the canopy trees, and understory trees, and then consider incorporating more native plantings with that through an incentivization. Kind of rewrite the code, as I may say, would maybe be better suited. Thank you for your time.
I have a question. I have a
Ted,
question.
you want to come back?
Please.
We have a question.
Yeah, the incentivization, I think, is an important issue. I was looking through the Native Plant Landscape Ordinance Handbook, where we started with this in 2017, I think, when we started migrating in this path. I noticed that many counties and cities have created a requirement. I don't know how that fits with incentive, but I need to pull it up here. They had county after county. Brevard is in there as well with 50% required natives. Let's see, I got to find where I put my notes. Minimum native requirement must be at the beginning. Keep skipping over it. So my question about incentives is, how do you see the best way of going about developing those incentives? I'm just going to read a few of them. Dade County and Miami require 30% native vegetation. Isla Medora, 75% native vegetation required with minimum number of species diversity specified. Martin County's 50% native vegetation. St. Lucie County, 50% native vegetation or water-wise landscaping required. Existing native trees, vegetation, and other natural features shall be preserved to the extent practical. We don't have anything like that in our ordinance, in our plan. So how would you go about incentivizing native plants if we indeed have to keep non-native plants on the list?
I will try to answer that question, and then I will use my experience to speak to that question's answer. I mentioned earlier I was privileged to watch the development of a tree protection ordinance. The key word, protection. It wasn't a landscaping code. It worked for a while. It tried to say you can't go cut down 40-inch diameter breast height live oaks. You have to protect them. It worked for a while, but it wasn't doing what needed to be done, which was to require landscaping. So go back and reiterate that as a newer ordinance where we drew upon IFAS as a list of plants. And the experience, just like I've seen here, was to grab too many that weren't specific for the area, and the survivability issue came up. The next iteration was a landscaping code that needed to incentivize developers to select those plants that are more suitable for an area and native. And that is usually done in the planning area of it. And in Titusville's development, I think you would find it to be more development in a residential atmosphere, multiple family perhaps, and single family, but certainly residentially. I've been back here since 2016. I graduated from Titusville High School in 1973. I migrated from California in 1957. So I'm not native, but I have been. And coming to see Titusville, I've seen a few things over time that I think need to be addressed. I had explained something I saw when my parents were still alive. Titusville landscaped US 1 and Main Street, real nice job, and they planted all these non-native, they call them Christmas palms. Anyway, I drove through town with my mom one day, and I said, I can't believe Titusville put these in. They're all going to freeze, and they did. So the point is, it looked good, but they all died. Somebody paid for them, and somebody tore them out, and somebody had to fix them back. And as a public administrator, that's just 3 on a match is not good. to incentivize development, you've either got to do it with some kind of square foot ratio to commercial, that if you'll plant native plants, that you'll get a differential density of single-family homes or a different density. That's really where the money comes from in the world of development. It's not coming from, I want to make it a pretty place. But I also will say that, and I wanted to confirm I don't get it wrong, everyone here probably saw all the news coming out of the tragic hurricane event that swept away most of Southwest Florida. And there was a great expose made during that about this is the way we shouldn't build, whether it's housing roofs. And we went through that. I went through that with Hurricane Andrew. And the housing code, building codes changed. All this stuff morphs because of events. What was the underlying theme on all the national news broadcasts was Babcock Ranch. If you ever have an opportunity, I highly recommend you go there and visit. Go see it firsthand. You could have seen it on the news. You can call it up on YouTube and watch it. But the significance of Babcock Ranch in the context of my concern and your answer to your question, incentivization, Babcock Ranch has a landscaping code which utilizes native plants. And they selfishly did it for one reason: they survive. The hurricane blew a lot of things away, but I heard someone mention sable palms. I mean, you have to work real hard to kill a sable palm. You don't see sable palms blown over in hurricanes. You might see them list on the riverfront where the soil eroded from the storm event and they fell in the water, but you know, they've been around for many thousands of years, and that's why they're here. They're a beautiful palm tree. Some people would not think so. And that's the second part of it, the ornamental planting. That was one of the comments I also made, was that the list appears to me to be more centric to an ornamental plant landscaping palette than it is a native planting palette. What you really want to do is figure out how do we get people to choose on their own volition native plants, parenthetically Babcock Ranch. And how do you incentivize it is going to be just a number of ways that you could possibly do it: through density adjustments, you could do it through floor-area ratio adjustments, you could possibly do it by permitting landscaping in areas which might not be landscaped. A good example is when you have retention areas which are required and you want to maintain them, it's kind of hard to maintain a retention pond. Public administration background again. To do that, if you've planted it full of plants. I enjoyed my walk around the chain of lakes this week, and as I walked, after being at the meeting last Wednesday about planting all the trees, and I was interested in that, and I looked at that, and that's a good thing. Those are retention ponds, period. It's a park, it's open space, and it's all those good things, but at the end of the day, it is what it is. If you go in there and try to plant things, you can't maintain it. I saw all the hydrilla being, or not hydrilla, I guess they're, no, this is I've just drawn a blank. It's a plant, and it's invaded that those bodies of water, and they've got booms out there. They're pulling the stuff aside. I guess they're going to, yes, hyacinths. Pretty plant. And you know, that kind of goes central back to what I suggested from experience. Water hyacinths were brought into South Florida because they look cool. Christmas cactuses, their counterpart that looks real cool, kind of like it, they get red berries this time of year, Brazilian pepper plants. So they started planting those. The beauty is they didn't have to be native, but they sure as heck native today. You can't kill them. But there's a point where Brazilian pepper trees stop growing. They can't grow any farther north than some parallel somewhere. I don't know what that is, but the fact is they don't grow in Georgia, they don't grow in Kentucky, they don't grow in Michigan. So the climate controls them to an extent. I think in the IFAS, what I looked at in the mapping, and it indicates tolerancy, it seems that the IFAS list is focused mostly on what I would suspect is the most important part of it, is the weather tolerancy based on climate, which whether you agree or disagree with the climate's warming, the climate is warming, and those freeze lines have been adjusted over decades of time. I could recall the freeze line, again, where you have the incentivization for native plants or plants that survive. In planting ornamental plants that now can grow here because we have a warmer climate. That's what happened when the IFAS map changed and the little blob went up, and now they call us Section 9, or 9A became 10. Yeah. Yeah, 10A. So if you really, interesting enough for me, was when you do this planting, what happens is it can become the Brazilian pepper plant because it's a pretty ornamental plant and it can take root and take hold and also grow out of control. So you want to be real careful for selecting those plants, which may be pretty, but in time, they used to be pretty plants, now they're nuisance. And just a couple I named right there are one of many. There's a lot more out there. Melaleucas, and you mentioned Brevard, Martin County. I worked in Martin County, and Melaleucas are just all over the place. Brazilian pepper trees, they're all over the place if you go towards Lake Okeechobee. They're not so prevalent when you get to the saltwater areas. So when I looked at some of the plants, those trees, those canopy trees, and I drilled down to see that particular plant, and each of those plants and trees will have a map corresponding to it specific for that tree, that plant, not more generalized based on the region of this 10A, or yeah, it was 10A, I believe that's it. And my concern is anytime you go grab everything, like a categorical list, you can grab things you don't and prefer not to grab. And I think that's been pointed out from other people in the audience. My particular 2 bits is don't have a public body create a list that becomes a painful circumstance later that causes the public body to have to go back and take it out and change it because somebody's complaining about, can you believe this? They made me plant it, now it died, now they make me replant it. I can even share with you the difficulty of having some plants like native plants and some of the trees. Developing the community of celebration came under my duration, from conception to probably I left there, Osceola County in 2009. So they could not purchase trees. They were growing so fast. The bucket size later, or what became bucket size prior to that, it was diameter breast height dimension standards. The code had this rule that said you shall plant this many of those size and that many of these size. The developer couldn't get it, couldn't buy it, wasn't available, out of stock. So you really, my caution is slow down, take a look at this list real carefully, try to weed through some of the stuff, which I think everyone will agree there were some on my list that just simply aren't here. Take the time, examine it carefully, but also ask yourself, do you want to implement a beneficial native plant species population? Do you want to incentivize it so that people choose it on their own volition? They want to do this. And retention pond areas in certain plants work perfect, and that's one good way you can do it. You can allow things that otherwise wouldn't be allowed. Sometimes it's in public rights of way. Sometimes it's donations to parks using chain of lakes. We had a corresponding where developer, I'm still on incentivization, I haven't lost track of that. The developer wants an ornamental subdivision. Not Babcock Ranch as the example I gave, but we'll call it Peaceful Valley. And it's, our development team says it really will sell if it looks like this. It's going to be full of Christmas cactuses, full of Christmas palms, I don't know. Example is that the incentivization is, okay, developer, if you want to do this because that's your palette, that's your choice, that's your architectural view, okay, we'll let you do it on your subdivision. But your incentivization is you're going to spend your money doing that, but now you're going to buy down the planting of all these other trees, and we're going to transfer that over to our public parks, our open spaces, maybe in certain roads where canopy trees are preferred. We can even use that stock to replace those trees which died, as my example gave. If you pick the wrong thing, you got to put something back for the Christmas palms, which they did, but you don't have to draw from the taxpayers' funding to do it. So you can create, and I think I'm correct, you responded, Eddie, that they have a program for a bank. I can call it a tree bank, I could call it a landscaping bank, but you have that already in Titusville.
Are you describing the Public Landscape Trust Fund?
Yeah, that was. And so you can take that as the depository of it, and you can examine the incentivization and add to it. Adding to it by choosing to do this, you don't want to do it there, but you want to do it over here. And it could be something like you get 2 for 1. If you planted the tree and you're the development, you plant 1 tree. If you want the Christmas palms, fine, but you're going to buy 2 of these. And if you can't put them in your subdivision, then we're going to charge you 3 of them, and you're going to put it in the trust fund. And there's some degree of equivalency. You have to be careful. You can't exact things that are, twisting your arm in a double hammerlock, but you can push the envelope to provide the community the best service, which is beautification, landscaping, which is beneficial to everybody, non-native plants that die and become costly to remove, and trees, which, as I said, I'm no fan of laurel oaks. Bless their heart, they do good things, but they have a place, probably not in subdivisions, because they end up not lasting a long time. I don't know if that answered your question, but that's as good as I can do.
Well, what if we were to, say, ditch the trees and plantings that we've been using since the 50s and 60s, the old list that we had, and we just scrapped that, and we started with the Florida-friendly and Florida-native list from IFAS. Not the Keystone list, not just that, just the IFAS Florida-friendly, Florida-native. That's in Zone 10B or lower.
Sure, I think that goes central to what I suggested.
Right.
To have the consultant prepare a list that doesn't generalize things, but goes plant to tree to plant species specific.
Right.
Identify those that they are tolerant to this area. As I said, I think it's fair to say this is a microclimate for this area. There's stuff about Titusville in the area that if you go to MEMS, it changes. If you go to Cocoa, it changes. Simple as that.
Yeah.
And that is how I would address it. Look specific. Don't be general with the list of grab it all. You've seen that there is already identifiably some trees that shouldn't have been there. Had perhaps I not raised the question, you would have had a list that contained trees that simply won't grow here. It's a fair statement. And if they don't grow here, you made somebody plant it. Now you have to make them put another one back. And that's not good public policy, not good public service, in my opinion. I would not just grab the list. This is an opportunity to fix an old list, to supplement it with some trees is one way of doing it, to re-examine it very specific for what should become an ordinance at last. As I said, it was probably 1986 when the developer went in at night, took 60 acres of an oak hammock down and had the bonfire going before morning came. And all these beautiful trees are gone. Everybody was upset. Matriarchal and patriarchal members of the community were up in arms. They created a task force. They created from that a tree protection ordinance. And then it went through the iterations, as I mentioned. So don't take the list too quickly. Take it slowly, examine it carefully, ask yourself again, what are you really wanting to do? Do you want an ornamental landscape community? It's pretty, it's South Beach perhaps be an example, or where in Martin County I could say you saw that was to drive down Jupiter Island. If you go down Jupiter Island, you probably won't find any native trees. You won't find any native plants, but it is one pretty place. It's beautiful, but it's meant to be that, beautiful, not sustainable, not environmentally beneficial. I can also say, flip that coin over, when you try to make something look sellable, you want to make it a place people want to come here. That's what Titusville wants to do. It wants to grow. I mentioned on that same Wednesday the growth here in Titusville is obviously going to reach a threshold pretty quick. Things happen when that occurs. You want to be prepared for that. And if you make people plant everything that's native and everything that's lovely plants, some places that's just not as appropriate. So you got to have a balance. And incentivizing the balance is even a better way to double your money on it.
Do you agree with the idea of having a stakeholders meeting, a workshop to paint it out?
As a professional planner, I would say 100%, no, just put another 1,000% on that answer, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you for that. That was really, really good. But I don't want to get into a big discussion about incentivizing things tonight, because that's not what we're here for. That's something that's for a later meeting. We can certainly do it, and I hope we do, but we need to focus on tonight. Our task is to take this list, the proposed list for the technical tree manual, and we can add trees, or we can add things to it, and we can take things off of it. That's basically what we can do tonight. Or, if we feel like we want more time. I personally didn't have time to go over it. It came at kind of a busy time of the year, I'm sure, for all of us. I know that the council, they had the first reading last night. I know that they would like to push it through, but as Ted said, this is our opportunity to do something really, really good, and we don't want to just push it through. Lori, are there any other cards?
Yes, one more. Stan Johnston.
I don't think so. Yeah, there it is. Thank you. I'm sure people would like to shut me up anyway, so I'm out of jail now, and I'm here before you. I don't know what DOT is doing, but it looks like DOT has, it appears that they've solved their problems of vegetation, because it's just, if you go along I-95, I've seen just both sides is just full of Brazilian peppers. It looks like it's working very well for Brazilian peppers. I'm kind of joking in a way because, you know, it's sad what's going on. It's sad. I was born in West Virginia, and I was born right near the Elk River, and also a little city called Buffalo. We don't have any buffalo anymore in West Virginia. We haven't had for a long time. We don't have any elk either. Long time. Now, there's someone who came up here named Kim that said that nature's resilient. Well, I can tell you right now is nature wasn't resilient for the buffalo and the elk where I lived. Even though I lived in West Virginia, I came down to Florida many times, even beginning in 1952. I went to places where I'd see snook by the hundreds of thousands going in the fresh water. I don't know, it's spawning or whatever they're doing. Hundreds of thousands of it. I'd go. There's times at night we would go for wet roads, and we would go pop, 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 pop as we ran over frogs and snakes. There's so many of them. There was a time the monarchs used to be just everywhere. It seemed like. I understand 90% of them are gone. What I'm saying is nature is not resilient. I'm glad that you're giving this consideration. I'm not sure where you should go with it, but I think Mr. Garrard said some very useful things. And if you're going to make a decision tonight about what Laura Lee just said, is that I'd like you to consider what Bill Klein and Tony had to say about this list, that it doesn't seem like it makes sense. And maybe there was a mistake made back in, was it June of last year? Something like that. So I'm bringing that up to your position, but I'm seeing some insanity going on as far as what people are doing. And you know, we can talk about insanity like MAD, what is that, mutual assured destruction? That's what it seems like it's set for not just nuclear power, but nuclear energy and war, but also for the Indian River. Right now is that nitrogen and phosphorus is considered to be the poisons that are killing our river. We don't consider any pesticides, we don't consider any herbicides. And when I propose it, where if anyone proposes it, it's put down. It will not do it. The government will not test our river for poisons, except for nitrogen and phosphorus. It's just nonsense. Similarly, I have this poster up here, is the city of Titusville, they won't even turn the fountains off and spray people with sewage, and won't turn the fountains off. So there's an insanity going on here. In fact, as I just got back from a counselor because of my arrest and so forth, and saying, I can't believe what's going on. I cannot believe what's going on in this world. It appears to me as that the city of Titusville is full of a bunch of insane people. Only a few people are sane. How can we live like this? I don't know. I don't know what's going on. But we have a massive destruction of our environment throughout the world. The United States used to be very much like Africa. I mean, it was full of wildlife and vegetation and so forth. It used to be like, that's what some people described it to me. And if you look at the old books, it's nothing like that now. I used to have a pet praying mantis. I don't even find any praying mantises anymore. And pet praying mantis, I would feed it grasshoppers and so forth, and lay eggs for me and things like that. And then I get a lot more praying mantises. But I see very few praying mantises anymore and all that. But I don't need to go on there. I think I've taken enough of your time, and I appreciate you listening to me, and maybe listen to me again the next time I talk. Thank you. Good luck.
All right, thank you, Mr. Johnson. All right, so, Eddie, why don't you go ahead and, the consultant from Kimley Horn is here, and we're glad to see you, because first we were told you weren't going to make it tonight, and now you're here, so, I think you're going to be an integral part of this process, so, Eddie, could you introduce Gina, please?
Absolutely, yes, thank you. This is Shima Laguerre with Kimley Horn, and she's our consultant. Shima was at the TEC meeting in June and presented the list and solicited feedback from the commission at that time. And so I'll turn things over to Shima in case she has anything she wanted to cover up right, or go ahead and take questions from you all. Thank you.
Thank you all for having me. So I did receive a lot of the comments that were made from community officials as well as just residents in Titusville. And I myself, I'm a resident. I used to live in Brevard County. I was born in Cape Canaveral. I used to come up to Titusville all the time for basketball tournaments at Titusville High School. So I do know the climate here in Titusville. I don't just live in Orlando and only deal with Orlando. I live in Altamont Springs now, but I still know a lot about Brevard County. I have family that lives here. So when we did this list, we were told by the city of Titusville and the entire planning staff to come up with a recommended list. This list is not a requirement. It was a list that was told to look at IFAS, Keystone, and the Florida-friendly landscape, which is what we did. So what we did is we looked at all the lists and we said, okay, what are the items, what are the landscape and the plant materials on all these lists that are readily available for developers, landscape architects that are native, that may be non-native, but that will grow in this zone. And at the time, it was 9A. Now the zone is 10A, so that means that, of course, the list can get bigger, it can get smaller, but it will need to be modified because the zone has changed. What we did include, we included plants that were, again, going to be Florida-friendly, native if they were possible, as well as plants that were actually going to grow in this, that were going to grow in this environment. There were some on the list that may not have been the best, but they, per IFAS and per the Florida-friendly, would do well in Titusville. That is something that could have been a foresight for us. We could have dug a little bit deeper and said, okay, you know what, maybe this isn't one that's going to grow really well in Titusville, but it grows like in Mims or in Cocoa, but it grows in that zone. That's something that we could have looked at absolutely and said, okay, you know what, let's strike that off the list. There are some that we will remove, such as the river birch, the tulip poplar tree, and the spruce pine. But other plants that are on that list are native, some are not, but they will grow in this climate. When it comes to native species, it wasn't told to us that we need to create a list that was 100% native. It was told to us to look at the list and make sure that the list was IFAS, Florida-friendly, and Keystone, and put plants on the list that were available and to modify the current list. So what we did, I looked back at some of I think I received some comments on the plants on the native Keystone list, and I just went over it just quickly today just to kind of see how many of those plants that are native are actually available. So on the first sheet that I have, there's 32 plants, 32 native species, only 6 are actually available for purchase in the state of Florida. That is not per us, that is not per the city of Titusville, there are only a few nurseries that hold these native species. So as a landscape architect and as a consultant, why would I put plants on a list that I know are not available by the nurseries? If the nurseries aren't growing it, where are we going to get those species for the developers to then, let's say, plant 1,000 native species? If the nurseries don't have them, how are we going to do that? So that's also an issue that we have. So we looked at all the lists and we said, okay, what's available, what will grow, and how can we make the list the best possible list for recommendations for developers to use on this list? And that's what we did. We created a recommendation, not a requirement, of what is available, readily available for both trees, understory, ground cover, grasses, vines, perennials, all the things that you see on this list are plants that are readily available that will grow. Some may not, but the majority will grow in Titusville. And the ones that won't grow, we can remove. I'll take questions.
I have one, yeah. It's the same problem that we have with electric vehicles. There's not enough electrical charging places. It's the same problem we have with hydrogen vehicles. Where do I go to get my my fuel cell recharged with hydrogen, right? It's a supply and demand thing.
Correct.
So what we have to do is create the demand for native plants and for Florida-friendly plants, and ditch the need or idea that non-native, non-friendly plants are worth planting here, in addition to the ones that don't grow. Right?
That is correct.
So that's the page that I'm coming from. I
Yeah.
want to make sure that what we have going forward is incentivized to plant natives. And if it was all native and all Florida, well, I backed down, I agreed with the Florida-friendly part. So we should at least have those. The problem that I have is some of the ornamental plants that were on the list from the 40s, 50s, 60s that we've carried forward all these years that really are not appropriate for here. And some of those are still in there. So as you noted, 3 of them that needed to be removed. So I'm just not convinced yet that we've got that tight a hold on this list that we're, I mean, there's people who have complained about the ones that are on there. So
Yeah.
obviously there's more work that needs to be done before we can approve this.
Which we can definitely modify. I definitely know that some of the native species that were talked about from Ms. Kim were the beautyberry, the wax myrtle, and the sweet acacia. Those are already on the list. So those are 3 native plants that we clearly saw that, hey, you know what, those are plants that we know as an expert and as a landscape architect, developers want those. They're pretty, they smell, they are readily available, so nurseries in this area have those plants.
Right.
So one of the issues that I will talk about is this keystone list. So I went through those 32 and I looked and I said, okay, I would love to have a lot more native plants on this list. The closest of some of these plants are available are in Georgia. What developer is going to actually want to go then to Georgia, which, like you said, it's going to be a demand. So what we have to do.
But wait a minute, wait. Putting
ahead.
it on the list so that it could be planted is not the same thing as saying he can find it and buy it.
Correct.
Okay, so putting it on the list so it can be planted, if somebody in a native plant nursery decides they want to start propagating these, then we can plant them.
Yes.
Right?
Again, this is a
Okay.
recommendation. It's not a requirement.
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying, but
Yeah.
there are plants that are not on here.
Correct.
Because you found them not to be available.
Correct.
And yet they're native and/or Florida-friendly. And I
Yes.
think they should be on the list if they're native or Florida-friendly, whether or not you can find a person to sell you one.
That is what you're telling me now. When we first did this list, that was not told to us. We were told to modify the current list with the Florida IFIS, Keystone, and the Florida Friendly, which is what we did. Now we're being told that we need to look at all native. A lot of the plants that are on here are native. We can go back and say, okay, you want us to look at all of Keystone, no matter if it's available or not, put it on the list. So what happens then? What happens then if we put all these plants on the list and there comes a developer like Babcock or like Celebration, and they're like, okay, great, I want to do all of these native species. And then you may say, let's say the city modifies their code and there's now a requirement to have 30, 40, 50%, 30, 40, 50, or 60% native landscape. And they go and they're like, oh crap, I can't find any of these species, but it's on the recommended list, which
That's-
it can be.
That's exactly the kind of pressure that will create
That is
more
fine. We
native
can do
plants
that.
and more native plant nurseries.
We can do that.
That's what we should be doing, because that's the
can do that.
direction we want to grow. If we want our birds and we want our caterpillars to feed them and all of that, I mean, it's
Absolutely.
all one web of things that grow together.
Yeah, as a landscape architect, I have no issue doing that. We do this in multiple other municipalities. It is a requirement for us to do that in certain jurisdictions. We have no issue doing it. But if you're telling us that our scope was to look at the list and to just modify the list and provide a list of plants that will grow in this area, that is what we did. We did what we were told to do. We just now need to expand on that, and we have no issue doing that. I just want to make it perfectly clear that Kimley Horn has no issue helping the city of Titusville create the kind of landscape that they want. Don't make it that we don't want to do this. We actually want to help. That's why we're here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Member Fliss?
Thank you. I know that your list that you have, this is just a piece of an idea to give you. I know that you have your list, and I also make the assumption that when developers see the list, they're not required to purchase every single plant on the list.
That is correct.
Right, yeah. So if something isn't available, but it's on the list, at least it's available, right?
But that also means that if it's not on the list, it doesn't mean that they can't do it as well. So that also, a recommended list is just a list of, let's say the city said that, okay, you know what, we're not going to put, because there are 1,300 native species. Do we want to put 1,300 native species to have, let's say, 70 sheets that they're going to be like, oh, I wonder if it's on the recommended list? If they hire a consultant, the consultant if the client tells them, we want a native palette, the consultant is going to do exactly what it needs to do. They're going to look on the website and they're going to say, okay, let me make this a native palette, regardless of if it's on the recommended list or not, because again, it's just recommended. Now, if you made this a requirement, then that's when we need to show all 1,300 species. But because if it's just a recommended list, it's just a recommended list of what grows here, and you can use it as a guide to help you decide what you want, but it's not required.
True, but if the recommended list is predominantly native species, you're targeting, you're pushing the target audience over to an area that we personally prefer.
Which we can do.
Right, thank you.
I like to extend what they're saying, that, yes, we want a list of what we want, okay, and those requirements of native and so forth. You talked about they may not be able to get them. Well, last year, when we came up with this list, my wife, if you've been to my house, she loves to garden. So I took this list and I went to Lowe's and Home Depot, and I saw the list, and I saw plants that they were selling that were not on the list. And we bought some because my wife thought they were pretty. They died 2 weeks later. We went back to Lowe's and Home Depot and we complained, and they said, I have no control. Corporate at corporate headquarters makes the decision, and they send us what they wish to send us. And I says, this plant we bought does not grow in Florida. It grows in Virginia.
That is.
And so they had 100 plants sitting there that didn't grow in Florida. So depending on, you're depending on these suppliers, these companies that are corporate, owned by somebody in some office that I will be nice and not say the word I want to say, okay? They're making decisions without any knowledge of what they're doing because they're worrying about some dollar.
Correct.
Okay? So we don't want to sit there and say, oh, they can't get it, and make that the problem. We're going to make them have to do something. And that's what I want to say here. I've already experienced this with this list and these two stores of their stupidity, and I don't want to see that repeated.
I understand. So with that, I would say that Home Depot and Lowe's are not places that developers or landscape architects are going to shop for developments. They just don't have the supply, and typically we're using local nurseries because they have the supply that we need. Home Depot and Lowe's, again, like you said, they're corporations. They're only going to send what they want to send. A developer is not going to go to Home Depot or Lowe's to look at a list and say, okay, you know what, I need live oaks. They don't sell the biggest live oak that they can find. They don't have 3-inch caliper live oaks. They don't have Coontie palms that are going to meet the requirements that the city may have. So a developer, a landscape architect is going to go to a local nursery closest to that area to tag trees to find that are actually going to work in that area. So what we can do is we can update the list again to incorporate those native plants that everyone can agree on. Maybe not 1,300 of them, because again, that's going to be an extensive list that no one's ever going to look at. So you just are putting plants on a list just to put plants on a list. Let's think about it, the ones that are actually going to make sense for this area, and we can modify the list. But now that we know that Titusville wants to go in that native direction, we can do that, because again, what we were handed, which was the first list, had nothing to do with native. So when we were told to modify the list, we did just that. So now we know that the city of Titusville wants to go native, we can go native.
Do you, by any chance, have you gotten the list? See that poster there, which has 315 trees, plants, she's giving you that list. Good, because she does a lot of research.
I do have the list, and so we use a lot of websites when we made this list. We went on the Florida friendly list, the Florida friendly website, IFIS, and we also went on the Florida Native Society's website. And so what we can do is, now that we know that Titusville is in 10A, that changes a lot of things. We were in 9A when I did this list, or not, it was 9A, 9B. So we were in 9B when we did this list. So now if you go on the website, it clearly tells you, based on everything in Brevard County and in Titusville, what will grow in that area. So now we're in 10A, the list changes, we have to modify things. We were in 9B, there are some things that are gonna shift. So I have looked at the list. There are, again, a lot of species that we just missed because we didn't know that we were going the native route. We went based on what developers, what is readily available, and what we know usually works in the city of Titusville.
Good job.
Okay, so. Actually, I keep hearing a lot about this number and that number and that number, and it's just a series of scorecards. I have a feeling that we're not really that far off.
We're not. We're really not that far off.
I have a feeling that this is not something of extremes. It's just that we missed 20 here and 10 there, and we changed the zip code, so now we need to modify for the zip code.
Correct.
And is that all we're talking about?
Honestly, yes. We missed some plants. We missed some native species that we can easily add to the list. We did not do an egregious act of put no native species. We saw that there are native plants. We did take off laurel oaks because laurel oaks should not be planted. I know they're native, but they shouldn't be planted. As soon as it rains, the storm that we had last week, a laurel oak would have fell over. A live oak would have been standing strong, just like a sable palm. So we're smart enough to know, like, hey, you know what? Let's do what we as landscape architects and what the experts know. Let's update this list based on what we have. We updated it. We can definitely go back and add in more native species, have no issue doing it. We now know that we're in 10A, so now we will look at the list again and say, okay, what grows in 10A? Let's make sure that it's readily available. Let's make sure that developers are going to want it. Let's make sure that it's native. Let's make sure that it hits all those things that are important to Titusville, and we will add it to the list.
And again, that's from what I hear. And so do we have we as a community come together and put our hands around the 10s and 20s of this kind and 15s and 20s of the other kind, and so that we can do the scoreboard? Or are we chasing an N+1 game? That no matter what list we come up, there's always going to be someone or some entity that's going to raise their hand and say, you missed one. Okay, and so we owe it to everyone, all of us, to try to come to an agreement that says this is the best we can do at this point. And this is how many we can get of all the categories and come up with this list so that we can get there. Otherwise, we're going to be chasing the N+1 all the time, and somebody's not going to be really happy and fulfilled that they missed their plant. It's going to happen. But that's okay. That's a living document. And so as a living document, things should be added to it. We're going to miss stuff, no matter what. No matter what. So what I'm recommending, Madam Chair, is that we take the scorecards, okay, and in a very short amount of time, come together and have all the parties that are experts and have knowledge and data to make up this list. And once we do that, then we can come to some agreement as a society and a community, and that's going to be our list. And so what I propose is that, again, the short amount of time, to me, is about a month. I think there's a lot of data out there that just needs to be siphoned and put into the basket, okay? And let's put it in the basket and get it together. I don't know. This is just a thought.
I like that idea, but I think it's probably not going to fit in the time frame that the city council would like us to have, but I think that a month is reasonable. But I think that we should, I mean, we can take these lists home and we can go through them and we can look on the internet and see what might grow here and what might not. But in order to come to consensus, I think we need to have that workshop. And it probably needs to be open to the public and invite the planning and zoning members. Right now, Eddie, the timeframe that you guys are trying to accomplish is for TEC to approve a list tonight that would then go to the P and Z at their next meeting and then be on this council's first meeting in February. Is that the goal?
No, so the ordinance has been advertised for the final public hearing to be on January 23rd. So tonight, the TEC's recommendation will be forwarded to City Council to decide what action to take. And if the recommendation from the board is to continue the item, City Council can consider that. I did have one other point, though, that I wanted to suggest for consideration, because it sounds like there's been a lot of discussion about the native species, and I feel like there's consensus on that item. But there was one other point that was brought up during the P&Z meeting that I don't think we've given enough feedback or consideration on, and that's the idea that some of the tree species that are suitable for neighboring hardiness zones. So, for example, we're in 10A. Would a tree that's suitable for 9B be close enough? Is that okay to allow trees kind of on the border, or would the commission prefer only trees that would survive in 10A only? So I'd like to give the consultant some more feedback on that consideration.
Okay, I mean, my opinion is that we're definitely getting warmer. In fact, the Christmas palms that froze, that were taken out and replaced by more Christmas palms, seem to be doing better now. But we haven't had a big freeze, but I don't know if we'll ever have another freeze, a big one. I think that anything, that like these ones that are on here that are in the 9A and northern Florida, and, they should be taken off, because they're having a problem up in Maine with some of their trees up in Maine that can't survive now because of the climate warming. So it makes no sense at all to include trees that obviously aren't going to survive in a warmer climate that we seem to be experiencing. I don't see any more lights. I'll open it up for you, Sheena.
I would say that because we were previously in 9B, it wouldn't make sense to just remove plants that are still 9B when we are now 10A. I do think that maybe 9A, we can look at it and say, okay, you know what, maybe that palm or maybe that tree probably shouldn't be in Titusville, let's take that one off. But to just generalize and say any tree that's not 10A that we shouldn't have on the list, I don't think that that's actually the best approach. I think we still want to be broad enough, because there are trees that are technically 9B that do still grow in Titusville. So I think we want to be smart about it and say, okay, if it's 9A and it doesn't do too well, it can survive, but it's not the best, let's take it off. But if it's a 9A and it does fine, keep it on the list.
So do we want to try to go through this list tonight and come up with what we want to add and take off, or do we recommend, I guess we have the option to recommend to City Council that we take a little bit more time so that we can do this right. What happens if they, as they have done before, they don't accept our recommendation and they just approve this existing list during the second reading?
That's certainly a possibility, and so I would suggest if that's your direction, that you're going to recommend to council that the item be tabled, and you're unsure if council will take that direction, to go ahead and give the consultant as much feedback as what you would like to see improved, because that can be incorporated into the list and presented to City Council during the meeting.
Is the list going to go in front of planning and zoning again, or are we the last bus stop here?
It will go in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission, correct?
Then we need this is the whole integration that we've been trying to do. And so this is a great moment for the city of Titusville to try to get some of these committees to work together. I have a problem, can you guys help us? And we're trying to do just that. So in order, I think, to do that, we may need a little bit of time, which in the tree world is almost meaningless. Okay, and so, you know, we would like to incorporate the planning and zoning folks who send it down to us and say, here's a product. What do you guys think? But work it among the committees, and then let's go to council with a unified position of the TEC and the P&Z that says, yeah, we looked at it, we're all good. And we can work with that. Because they're the ones who are seeing the developers. We're not, they're not coming here. So the product has to be inclusive of their needs. And I think that's very important, and I think it's a great opportunity to do that. So, what do you think?
Is that your recommendation?
No, I'm verbalizing what I think it should happen. Okay? It'll be a together position versus going with a TEC position. And that should carry more weight to council. Guys?
Yeah, I'd like to just weigh in to say that I agree with it. I think we should take the time to get everybody on board. That way we can, get this thing done and get it done correctly. We've been at it a long, long time, and we have a zone change in the process. That's how long it's taken. But I think it would be worthwhile. There's no reason why it has to be done like in the month that we have in front of us. If city council decides that they want to move forward anyway, it's on them. I think our recommendation should be the best recommendation that we can give.
Member Yao?
Yes, it doesn't seem to me feasible at all that we can approve this list tonight without the adjustment to the 10A. I mean, that just doesn't seem like that can happen unless you happen to know offhand the few species we can switch out. That just doesn't seem possible. And I wasn't going to bring the second part up unless it was going to be extended. But I just wondered if it would be worth putting on a list like this in light of some of the presentations tonight regarding caterpillars and birds and so forth. If there was maybe a point at the bottom where you would say, hey, do you want to promote butterflies, then plant these 3 in combination. If you want to attract hummingbirds and make a real garden of it, plant these 4 together, rather than a developer, however, looking at them all separately or just in terms of color. Maybe we could build in a recommendation of some sort. That would require Native Plant Society or somebody to look at it and say, hey, yeah, it's really good to plant these 4 together if you're going to do it. And that makes it way better than just picking a random 3.
Right. Thank you. Oh, that was good. That's great.
Yeah, so I kind of got a summary. We're looking for Florida natives, we're looking for Florida friendlies, and we're looking for the Zone 10A. Did I miss anything else? Non-natives or non-friendly, non-natives are not allowed, or off the list. Is that what we're looking for? Do you want a motion to table this until Kimberly Horn can produce that list for us? Till our next meeting? Or what were you suggesting?
But Mike, also, along those lines, I would like to see the input from
Sure. So it's got to come back to us.
the public. I should let, the native, society. Even a call to IFAS might be in the works, okay? And invite them and say, hey, guys, we're doing this.
So back to the workshop idea.
Well, a workshop, but again, it's a summary of, because I think we have all the cards, we have the scorecards with a lot of work by a lot of people that have been put in. So it is not starting new. It is, this is what we need to add, this is what we need to subtract, and this is where we're going. And bring the PNC in and everyone else, and again, I think it's a scorecard issue. We're not that far away, in my opinion. Maybe I'm totally wrong, which I've been known to be, but that's okay. Well, I always express what I really feel, and from what I hear and what I see, I think we're almost there, guys. And council is not gonna wait months, it's gonna wait 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to be a whole lot more palatable to the council if we can give them a short timeline of what we think we need. Remember, Yount?
Yeah, I just wanted to address, if we table, can we do that and also make a recommendation? Like, make a recommendation that this is why we want more time. We want to do the things Mike said, and so we wouldn't be just tabling it with no explanation. Is there a way that we can still make a recommendation and table it, so that if they do decide to go ahead anyway, we will at least have told them why we wanted to table it, if that makes any sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I think that the motion to table should include the reasons why we want to table it and a proposed date that we think we might be able to accomplish this.
Is there any interest in, once we get to that final product, then having a workshop to introduce this to the stakeholders, to get any last discussion out in order to get everybody on board?
I think that the stakeholder input would come from the workshop, and then Sheena would produce the list, and then that would come back to, I guess, the TEC and immediately go to the P&Z and then to council. But I think we need the workshop in order to come up with the final product, and then the stakeholders can look at it and comment at the TEC meeting and the P&Z meeting. I think that's the order it should go in. I think we need the workshop first.
So we can have a workshop in 2 weeks and have it ready for them the week afterwards? What's it take to have a workshop? How do you declare a workshop and how you organize it? Can this council meet again in 2 weeks and invite the public, whoever wants to come, and have the workshop just by us meeting in 2 weeks and deciding and get it to them? What's it take to have a workshop?
It takes a public notice. And I think that you need at least 2 weeks to do the public notice. Is that right, Eddie?
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, we can call, if you look at our enabling legislation, we can call special meetings and stuff if we want to. But it would have to be, the timing would depend on when the public notice appears, I think.
We can't do that before our next meeting.
Yeah, that's the goal, is to have the public workshop
Before our next meeting.
before our next meeting, so that
So we can pick a
hopefully
date
we have
today?
a list that's available at our next meeting that we would look at and pass on to planning and zoning, and then to the city council.
Chairwoman, if I may, I can't guarantee that we have staff availability and resources to commit to a special meeting or to an extra workshop that hasn't been already planned for this project. So just giving you a heads up that I'd have to look into that.
As long as it's public notice, do we have to have a lot of city staff there? Can we public notice a meeting and then we can just get together, or does staff have to be there?
We have to have staff for the city facility, potentially for meeting minutes, because there are multiple members of the same board. So there could be some significant staff resources involved.
Okay, so I guess we're back to going through the list on our own, and I guess we can call up Kay or call up Bill and Marlis on our own, and then we'll flood Sheena with our suggestions.
Chairwoman, would it?
Point of order. I believe that he should be able to tell you that you can do meetings and so forth, and that's his job.
Chairwoman, if I may.
I think that you can make a motion to him to do it, and then if he can't do it, then he can tell you he can't do it. But he can't tell you right now.
Well, I think in order to stay on a schedule that would make the city council happy, us sending suggestions and having Sheena come up with a list, I think that's doable.
I was just going to suggest, would the commission feel comfortable giving general guidance instead of having to see the exact list with the individual species? Like if you said, for example, we want only species that are suitable for 10A and 9B. We want only X number threshold of native species, giving general direction instead of needing to see a very specific list. Would that be suitable to the commission, or is the commission's direction that you really want to see the reformatted list?
I personally would like to see the reformatted list. I don't know how the rest of you guys feel. Remember, yeah,
Well, if it came down to it, if, I was thinking what Eddie was thinking too, if we made a recommendation that the list be revised for 10A as well as any others that the experts think should still be on the list, and that was done, I mean, if that's all we can do, I would be fine with that. It's not preferred, but it would be okay.
I think we should go with the Florida native list that works in zone 10A and 9B. I think we should go with Florida friendlies. And I think everything else should be dropped. And I'm fine with going forward with that as a recommendation.
If that's a motion, I second that.
Okay?
all right.
Just a clarification, what does everything else mean?
Non-native, invasives, harmfuls, those sorts of things.
I don't believe we have non-natives on the list or invasives on the list already.
Well, we've got Cupressus arizonica is on the list.
That's not invasive.
No, but it's also non-native either. And thrives in Arizona, not Florida, which means.
It does grow in Florida.
Yes, but is it going to feed the caterpillars and the butterflies?
That's not what you said though, but it does grow in Florida. Go back, you didn't say that. It does grow in Florida.
Okay, Florida native and Florida friendly. We'll go with that. 10A, 9B. Not just the ones that are readily available.
Are you going to add something?
Yes, go, please. It's a discussion.
Well, wait a minute. We got a motion and a second,
And we're having a
and now
discussion.
we're having a discussion. Okay, the motion was made by Mike Myjack, seconded by Member Perez. Can you restate the motion so that Lori can?
Yes, I think we can go forward with a plant list that includes only Florida native and Florida friendly, as identified by IFAS, that work in zone 10A and 9B in this area. I think every other plant that's on that list that would then be qualified as non-friendly would be removed. So that's the essence of the motion.
Member Yount?
Oh, yeah, I remember you saying that some of the 9As would still grow here, but some of them would not.
Correct.
So the exception there would be then the 9As that would not grow here would
should
also
be
be removed?
Well, they could be in there with an asterisk and a footnote that says, plant this one at your own risk.
So then that would that include the Arizona as well? Because Arizona does grow here.
I know it grows here. I don't think it should be on our list. No,
Okay.
I know. I want to see Brevard being the Brevard that it was, not something else.
I would just say, in keeping with the spirit of this, if there's an old zone that we're pretty sure isn't going to do good, it should just not be on there.
Okay.
I agree with that. 9A is probably more on that list than 9B would be, I think.
Yeah, I goofed up my A's.
Scratch 9A for sure, and 9B put an asterisk on it.
All right, Member Bliss?
In the same way that not that not all natives were included on the list because that would have been very big, but they were natives, so that people could opt to plant them even if they weren't on the list. In light of Mr. Myjak's suggestion, just because a developer doesn't see, for example, that Arizona plant, they could plant it. It's not, right?
Correct. They could plant it.
So that's just more reason to go with what you're saying. I feel like we said this to them at the onset.
We did.
Right. And I
A year
feel.
and a half ago.
A year and, right.
Yeah.
And then I feel that in June, we were told, just put everything on the list and let the developers, because they're going to do what they want anyway. And I think that's why we kind of begrudgingly agreed. Right.
Then can we add an asterisk to that says, we like to prefer plants that attract animals, birds and bees and critters are preferred if that plant does it? Can we add that to your motion?
Yeah, I'll take the friendly amendment, that we also identify those plants that feed our wildlife and our birds. Keystone species, yeah. Well, there are some that believe that Sally's list is incomplete, and that there are some things that are on there that shouldn't be. So I don't know if Sally's Brevard Keystone list in and of itself is adequate. I would like to ask our Native Plant Society person, does this follow in line with what the Native Plant Society is trying to accomplish? Would you mind coming?
Well, I'm speaking on behalf of myself and not representing the Plant Society, but as a member and a board member of the Plant Society, I do have some background there. No, our mission is to strictly promote and advocate for native plants, not Florida-friendly. Florida-friendly has many desirable guidelines. First of all, planting the right plant in the right place. That's awesome, very important.
Right.
The Native Plant Society, I think, is more restrictive. So we don't advocate for using fertilizers and herbicides and things like that, for example. So I think our program is more restrictive and more focused strictly on native plants.
Right.
Whereas the Florida Friendly contains many plants that are not native but that might grow well.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Any chance I could make a comment? Very short.
Yeah, you guys okay with Kay coming back? Yes.
Most of the K. St. Ange, Maryland Avenue, most of the non-native trees on the ordinances list are friendly, Florida friendly. However, the Florida Friendly website indicates which trees attract birds, butterflies, and hummingbirds. So I went through that list and I isolated only the ones that attract butterflies, hummingbirds, and butterflies. I can give the consultant that list. Okay? You could remove all the ones that do not attract birds, hummingbirds, and butterflies, and you'd have a shorter list. But this is a list of all the 200 non-native trees and plants on the ordinances list that attract butterflies, hummingbirds, and what was the other one? Butterflies. So I'm more than willing to give that to the consultant if you will allow me to. Here it is. Giving it to her.
I see a lot of heads nodding. And I think that would take care of, because we've also been asked, and I forgot to say this, but we've been asked not to change the layout of the technical tree manual. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, you got 5 columns now, and we're looking at adding another column that would say whether it attracts birds and bees and butterflies. But I don't think we're not supposed to do that. So by using Kay's list, we're not going to be adding another column. I like that idea.
I have one more comment, if you'll forgive me, is that council directed staff to incorporate the keystone species list into this ordinance. All of it. And that was not done. I'm just reminding you of what I already said. Only 15 of the keystone species were listed, were included. The rest of them were not included. 85 of them were not included. I'm just reminding you of that. I have the list of the 85 as well. Thank you.
I think if we include all of the Florida native and Florida or just the Florida natives, then we would include those keystone species as well.
The
Well, I'm
ordinance,
saying what we were given does not include that, but the motion that we have on the table would incorporate all native plants into our list, including those that are on the keystone list.
the ordinance you have before you has many native plants, but it does not have all the keystone species plants.
Which is why we made a motion to incorporate into this list
All the
natives,
keystone species?
All friendlies, all natives include the keystone species.
Oh, there are more natives than are on the keystone species, so I don't know where
There are no
you.
keystone species lists that are not native.
What's that again?
There are
Say-
no species on the keystone list that
Right.
are non-native.
But
If
that-
you conclude all the natives, that will include all the,
I don't know how many hundreds and hundreds of native species there are, but there's only 101 keystone species, so I just think I'm agreeing with her. You might have a huge list if you included all native trees and
there's not that many.
plants.
300 and something.
There are 1,324 native species,
1,324. Which
Okay.
most of them can't be found. You can't buy them yet.
but you,
But I'm going to go back to the original statement. Council told staff to incorporate the keystone species list. But that's not what was done. So, if you want to include even more than the keystone species, you're just going to come up with a big list. Council ordered that the keystone species list be incorporated. I'm just repeating myself.
Go ahead.
So I think the point that Kay's trying to make is that if instead of, in the motion, instead of saying incorporate all native species that would grow in our zone, to incorporate the keystone species list instead, rather than the whole 1,300 native species that might be applicable.
Well, I don't see a benefit in planting non-natives, number one. I realize that some people think they're pretty and they're ornamental, but I believe for the health of our community, planting natives is the way to go. Keystone species list is a subset of all of our Florida natives, and not all of our Florida natives will actually live here in Brevard County, which is why we qualified it by Zone 10A and 9B.
I have a question. So I know that you just said that you want us to only incorporate native species. So then the Florida friendly list has to be excluded. So Florida friendly, there are Florida friendly plants, some of them are non-native. So on the list, are we expecting,
It's a non-native.
but you
it's
just said that you only want native species. So I'm just trying to clarify for my sake.
My personal preference is that we only have natives, but the motion I made was for natives and Florida
Okay.
friendly, okay, that are compatible with zones 10A and 9B. That was the motion that I made.
Perfect.
And then we had an amendment that you added to it.
Animals and critters.
To also, right, which is what this one.
Do we flag that those?
Yeah, it can be a little footnote on the end of each name. It doesn't have to be another column. It can just be a footnote.
Put a star in the name.
A star or an asterisk or a number or whatever.
how many footnotes are you wanting us to have? Because I do know that the manual has to look a certain way. So instead of having footnotes, why not we just have a different section that specifically says Keystone, and instead of having 7 to 8, 9, 10 keynotes, because then that gets,
Well, then we get into adding or creating sections where certain groupings of plants work well together. And like pollinators for butterflies, for example.
to not disrupt the way that the manual looks, we might have to do that. Because instead of having an asterisk that's specifically on there now, that's telling people that this is what X, Y, and Z is, and then we're gonna add a keynote 4, keynote 5, keynote 6, and all of a sudden we have a plant that has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 keynotes,
Yeah, I get it.
instead of just having one manual that has the current list, and then it goes into pollinators, and then it goes into Keystone, and it's just a flowing list that a landscape architect developer can look at and say, okay, I can get a plant from this list, I can go down to Keystone, oh, it's on that list, it's gonna hit all the boxes.
Okay, I'm okay with that.
Just to clarify, this particular list that Kay has provided, they are species that only grow, or that grow in Brevard County and support caterpillars and native bees. So if you use what's on this list rather than all Florida natives, I think we're gonna achieve what we're trying to do. Excuse me.
Yeah, I just had a question. I sort of assumed when I looked at this that this was a list of plants that was non-inclusive of every native in Florida, but that it would be the ones most attractive to developers. Was that kind of taken into account, that plants were selected like, okay, these would be something developers would want, but sort of things were left off that probably no developer would ever want? Is that taken into account at all?
I don't think so. I think the list that we got was more of what was available. Okay.
Where are we at? Well, I'm going to have Lori reread the motion. Please, Lori. Restate the motion, Michael, along with the friendly amendment.
What we want to see on the list are Florida-friendly, Florida natives, Zone 10A, 9B on the list. That was what the motion was. And the friendly amendment was to add a grouping that identified pollinators and those that feed our wildlife.
Now, just again, are there any of those 9Bs that shouldn't be on anymore?
Potentially, yes.
Essentially all of them.
Well,
That's,
again,
no,
That was the question, was do we cut the line at 10A or?
I would say an expert's recommendation, because
This is-
probably some are a little bit more likely than others, and if.
because
you
if we're
can-
gonna, yeah, because if we're gonna cut it, then it's not a recommended list anymore. It's a recommended list of what grows in Titusville, and if 9B still grows here, you have to have it on the list.
Yeah, but if something obviously wouldn't anymore, then take that off, right? Based on your judgment.
So-
Thank you.
Melaleuca, Brazilian pepper, all of those are off the list. That's. Okay, that's what we're going for. Any other?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Seconded by Member Perez. All right, let's hear what you got, Lori.
Roll call?
That's what we're at. Roll
We're
call.
we're at the
yeah.
roll call? Okay.
Call the question.
Member Young?
Yes.
Member Fliss?
Yes.
Member Delgado?
Yes.
Member Yount?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Myjack?
Yes.
Member Perez?
Yes.
Chairwoman Thompson?
Yes. So what is the timeline on this, Eddie?
So this will be presented to Planning and Zoning Commission on the 17th, and then City Council will hear for a public hearing on the 23rd.
Okay, so the list that Sheena's going to come up with within the next 2 weeks is going to be presented to Planning and Zoning in 2 weeks, and then going.
It's 1 week, not 2 weeks. That's
Oh,
next
1
week.
Oh, good luck. Can you do it?
I'm sure we can.
Okay. We're moving on then. All right, thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right, we're going back to the rest of the agenda. Thank you. Thank you for coming, everybody.
Thank you, Kim.
And Chairwoman, you may need to ask for a vote to extend the meeting. We're coming up on the 2-hour mark.
We may as well do that. Let's see what else. How long is your presentation on the Audubon gonna take?
It's brief.
It's brief? Okay. Should we go for 30 minutes?
That's fine. Let's go to 8 o'clock.
All right. We have a motion to extend the meeting till 8 o'clock.
Motion to extend to 8 o'clock.
Second.
Second? Okay. All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Let's get this done before 8. All right, so we're on to petitions and requests from the public. Is there anybody that would like to speak?
Bill Klein, 3 Indian River Avenue. I have a request that a future project that would be very good and help this present one is develop an idea of how you can incentivize the local native nurseries and other nurseries to grow plants that are on the list. Like if the list has some that they say aren't available, if the local nurseries are notified, these plants are going to be on the approved list of plants, they will plant them and they will be available. So don't worry if some of these plants right now are not available. People grow plants from seed and cuttings, and they can be made available within a year or less. Thank you.
Anyone else for petitions and requests? All right, thank you.
So I'm ready to talk now. You guys ready? Okay, my name is Stan Johnston, and although I say I'm an expert in sanitary sewage, it's kind of a difficult thing to say because I don't know if there's such a thing as an expert overall on sanitary sewage because it varies every place. It varies with the type of treatment. It varies with many things. But I have been educated and trained in sanitary engineering as a civil engineer graduate and also in many special projects in civil engineering that I worked on sewage treatment plants. I worked on sewage spills before coming here. And in fact, in the 9th grade, I won the state science fair, very top state science fair, overall science fair in the state of West Virginia for my project was on bacteriology. So I have, when I was in school, I started out in biology and I changed to engineering. So I do have some expertise and what you have seen many times is this poster that talks about the sewage spill in the city of Titusville, and which I want to say is this is an insane thing that our city has been doing. And the question is, why do they do it? But another question is, I want you to understand is, this policy still continues in the city of Titusville. When ponds are contaminated with sewage and they have fountains on them, and the fountains are on, they will leave them on. That's the policy. That's insane. That is council, city manager, and so forth. They allow that to happen. I want you to understand is that I recorded an affidavit in public records. And the title of that affidavit says, Affidavit of Incompetence, False Reports, and Fraud by all City of Titusville Water Resources employees who check sewage for sewage spills. That's pretty serious for me to do that. And so in the last paragraph of the affidavit, it says, please be advised that I intend to report any professional engineer who publicly refutes issues of this affidavit to the Florida Board of Professional Engineers for discipline as to their incompetence, not negligence, incompetence on this matter. Now, that's a serious matter that I'm doing. So I want you to understand is that I've been coming to city council meetings repeatedly for years, and I don't get any respect. However, I have challenged the city repeatedly. Get you a professional engineer to disagree with what I say. Well, they won't, and they can't, because the professional engineer will not disagree with me, because I will report them. They know that I will report them to the board. And yet, I still continue to get no respect. It's just dirt. As far as I'm concerned, I want you to understand is that although I'm a registered engineer and graduated in the Tau Beta Pi Engineering Honorary Society, and I was on the dean list in college, that I'm treated like dirt here. I want you to understand is that Sean Stauffer, he never had any training in civil engineering, sanitary engineering when he was in college. I don't know how he even got to be a professional engineer, because he wasn't even trained to be an engineer. Woody Rice is a mechanical engineer. So I would like you all to consider me as an expert. I'm not going to beg on my knees, but this is a serious matter of health, safety, and welfare. And that's my license, to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the people. And I'm fed up with you guys because you're not following through. I'm really disappointed with you, with all the city of Titusville. I'm the one who gets the dirt, and I'm asking you to follow through. And we've had several motions that went through here, and they're not coming back. They disappear somewhere between Brad Parish and council because they don't get anywhere. And these are serious matters of public health and safety. These are, in other words, this is women, children, and babies. Okay, I would like you guys to discuss it. I think it's even more important, as far as I'm concerned, critically important than what you spent over. I'd like some more time so that you can ask me questions and so forth.
We're going to ask you questions. I'm going to cut you off right now because I have some comments, and we may have some questions for you. In fact, I do have a question for you, but I want to go through the list of the TEC motions. I don't have them going all the way back to the 2020 sewage spill. We made several motions back then, like you need to put a fence around the polluted ponds, and you know, there was other motions that were made. I don't have those copies, but I do have, starting the first one on February 15th. Wait a minute. It's not where I want to start. I want to go back. Maybe it was. Pardon me. All right. First one I have is on February 15th, 2023. Vice Chairman Myjack made a motion to give you a 10-minute presentation, and we unanimously agreed. We heard your presentation on March 15th, 2023. Then on March 15th, 2023, The same day that you did your presentation, Member Fliss made a motion requesting city staff to provide standard operating procedures for sewage spills and a report listing all the sewage spills in Titusville that were reported to the DEP. We received that information. Then on May 10th, 2023, Member Young made a motion to recommend that the Titusville Environmental Commission, wait a minute, that's tree. So then on July 12th, 2023, Member Delgado made a motion to ask the council to acknowledge and report to DEP on the sewage spill that occurred after Hurricane Ian in the Baker subdivision. That recommendation was not forwarded to the council after this city was sent the information and the photos from DEP and Citizen of Titusville, me. Staff investigated these reports and found that there was no sewage leaks or spills. They stated that the subject lift station was functioning properly throughout the storm event and that the city reported the findings to FDEP and FDEP closed the case. Then on July the 12th, 2023, wait a minute. That's when I just read. On October the 11th, 2023, Member Fliss made a motion to ask that the City of Titusville staff inquire with the Florida FDEP as to their recommendation in turning off fountains in parks or stormwater ponds during a confirmed sewage spill or sewage being demonstrated in the pond waters. So the city sent an email to FDEP Central District, no response. Then they called and they left a voicemail with the Central District on November 2nd, 2023, as a follow-up to the email that they never received a response from, and they never got a response on that. My question to you, Stan, I mean, we are trying to follow up on what you've asked us to do, and here's the proof. But my question to you is, the last incident that I'm aware of where fountains were running after a sewage spill occurred at the senior, not the senior center, but the senior living facility that's off of Park Avenue, and those fountains were running. And when you reported that to the city, they turned the fountains off. Have there been any other instances where fountains were left on during a reported sewage spill that went into a stormwater pond since Hurricane Ian?
Okay, Hurricane Ian was about a year ago.
Yes.
A little bit over a year ago. Okay, that's not 2 years, about a year ago.
It was a year ago. In
You put up two
September,
fingers, I
the end of
thought.
September 2022.
22, okay, so during that particular one, you didn't mention the fountain at the senior center, not the apartments, but the senior center had a large fountain.
Okay.
So that was left on for a while, and they never recognize saying that they had turned off the fountain, although I believe that after some time, they did finally turn off the fountain at that senior center. So, but the thing is so I have talked to Kevin Cook about this particular issue, about the fountains and all. And I said, I would like you to make a public announcement, or the council to make a public announcement, that they will turn off the fountains when they have contamination in ponds. And he said to me, he won't do it. Okay? So right now, we still have a continued policy, continuing now for over 3 years, that they will leave the fountains on. I want you to understand that. This still applies today. It's crazy.
It is. It is.
It's not a little bit crazy. It's way crazy. I mean, let me just, in other words, we have a thing called the universal law, golden rule. Do unto others as you would have done unto you. Well, that busts that law big time. I mean, I know that Dan Diesel's not going to have his children out there playing in the sewage. Although his son lives on Carroll Avenue, and his son also recognized the sewage spill on Greenwood. So did you. So did I. And the sewage was coming out of the manholes on Morbecca and Greenwood, which had a sunken manhole. And not only that, is that at the corner of Beatrice and Sherry Street, they had a water leak, potable water leak, going on for over a year, unpatched. And yet what happened? We had sewage on top of that water leak.
Okay.
For a long time.
That's all stuff that happened in the past.
No, it's not in the past. It's just what you talked about.
According to the city, the case has been closed by DEP.
That's why we were asking it to be revisited.
We asked it to be revisited, and we were told that the case was closed. The city-
Okay, but it never did it ever come back to here? It maybe came to you and.
Here.
I know, that's what you're saying. You've got it right there, but this, okay. Miss Thompson, you've got it right there, but did it come before this meeting? I don't know that it was ever come to this meeting. In other words, it went to Brad Thompson and maybe Laura Lee, but did it come to this meeting? Like, I would like to know what the standard operating procedure is that you're talking about for sewage spills, because it doesn't work. You can't get any professional engineer to disagree with me that this standard operating procedure works. Nobody from FDEP can come up here. They'll lose. They'll be going toward the board. I promise you. I know that they're doing wrong. And if you were to read that instrument that I just gave you as far as the recorded document about the incompetence, you would understand. I give you clearly an example that the city of Titusville, I'm sorry, I'm getting maybe too close. The city of Titusville is disobeying everything that I know about sanitary sewage and leaks. What they are doing is conflicting. And the example I gave you is what happened at the fish kill. Remember what happened at the fish kill? We had a fish kill in Sandpoint Park Ponds. Whoops, I'm too close to this.
Stan, that was 2 years ago. I mean,
3 years ago. 3 years ago.
Okay, that was 3 years ago, and I believe that the north end of the river is messed up from it, but we're trying to move forward.
That's what I'm trying to do too.
We're trying to move forward, and
Okay.
so you continuing to bring up the past and
I'm bringing up the future to you right now.
Well, that's why you're not getting any respect, is because you keep beating on this thing that happened 3 years ago, and it was sad that it happened, but we need to move forward.
Laura Lee, you're missing the point. I am looking forward. I'm telling you right now is that anytime you have a spill, and I just had one, I was in jail because I was getting a sewage sample. That was just a few months ago. They put me in jail. Now, and they said I didn't have any rights to be there. I was at the same place where they had the 7.2 million gallon sewage spill, and they put me in jail. They didn't tell me why they arrested. Now, what I'm talking about the future is, apparently, you don't understand what I'm saying. I'm giving you an example of why the city, they are incompetent as far as their standard operating procedure. And I'm giving you clearly an example. May I give you that example again, please? Because I didn't finish it. May I do that? I asked for your record. I would like you to understand why, clearly why, that the city of Titusville, that you should be able to.
No.
Okay, you don't want to hear it. That's the future. Forget the future. Go ahead and spray the kids, spray the women. Do not recognize the sewage spills. That's what Laura Lee says. Thank you. Shall I sit down now?
Yes.
Okay. Damn you.
Anybody else want to speak under petitions and requests?
I believe we'll be on item 8A, which is the TEC election of officers.
You're correct. So we have no old business?
No, we do not.
Okay. So we need a chair and a vice chair, right? Who wants to be the chair? Thanks.
I think she needs a break.
I nominate you to continue as chair.
I was just going to do that.
You can have it, it's okay. I'll second.
I nominate Laura Lee to continue as chair.
Second, if it's needed.
Nobody can do it as well as you.
Let's make this exciting. I nominate Michael Myjack to be chair.
A vote, we have to have a vote.
I'll second that. So I guess all those, does anybody else, are there any other nominations? No, okay. All right, who wants me to be the chair? Raise your hand.
Speaking cards.
Do we have cards?
Stan has signed up for everything. But typically on a vote like this, I would roll call and you would name who you wanted to become.
Okay.
Just for
Okay, well, let's hear the speaker card.
I'm sorry, haven't we moved past this? Haven't we moved past petitions from the public?
He filled out a speaker card about the election.
Thank you. Listen, I can say is from the, what I just had experienced from you guys right now about diagnosing as far as checking for sewage spills, and I'm telling you that the city of Titusville, all of them are incompetent, and you don't want to hear why. I don't think any of you should be on this board. I think as far as you're doing is you're damning all these people who have been poisoned by this sewage spills. I'm ashamed of you. I really am. As far as I can, because here's what today I went. I went to a counselor, and I explained to him a number of these things, a psychologist, because it's driving me nuts too. But he says, I can see is what you guys are, it's on a level of insanity. When you will poison your children and babies with sewage spray, and you will continue to do it for 3 years on your policy, city's policy, I don't have any respect for you at all, and you've shown no respect for me. So as far as I'm concerned, you're full of dirt, and I don't think any of you should be there. Thank you.
no.
So say again how this works? You just go down.
So I will roll call, and yes, I roll call the people that have been nominated, and then you select the name since there's 2 names.
Okay.
Right? Member Perez,
Michael Myjack.
Vice Chairman Myjack,
Myself.
Member Young,
That's the other young. Oh, that's you.
You're young.
I'm young? Ms. Johnson.
Member Delgado,
Ms. Johnson.
Member Fliss,
Laura Lee.
Member Yount,
Laura Lee.
Chairwoman Thompson.
Remember my Jack.
That's 4 votes for Chairwoman Thompson and 3 for Member Myjack, Vice Chairman Myjack.
Okay, so now we got names for vice chair.
I nominate Michael Myjack for vice chair.
A second?
Are there any other nominations? Does that mean he gets it, or do we still have to have the roll call?
I believe you roll call, just as a unanimous vote. Member Yount,
Yes, Mike.
Member Young,
Yes.
Member Delgado,
Yes.
Member Fliss,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Myjack,
Yes.
Member Perez.
Yes.
Chairwoman Thompson.
Yes. Okay, moving on. we get to see the local government operations GHG report. Is it a PowerPoint or?
No, I'm just going to talk about how we created this report. It was a partnership initiative with ICLEI in Audubon, Florida. We had a university student help us make this report. So I'll just give you a brief summary of it. So municipalities and counties in the Indian River Lagoon region partnered with Audubon, Florida and ICLEI. And the university we worked with was Stetson. To expand the capacity and capabilities of assessing greenhouse gas emissions within municipal operations. A student fellow from Stetson named Alexia helped the city in our pursuit to understand the emissions contribution of municipal operations and set a baseline for future action plans. Our student Alexia utilized ICLEI's ClearPath tool for GHG inventories and received technical assistance throughout the cohort to produce the narrative that you have. The data collected from city facilities was from the year 2021. If you're wondering why, that's because the EPA's most recent data was from 2021, so we had to match that. The data provided by the EPA is from the inventory of U.S. greenhouse gas emissions and sinks by state, which covers 1990 to 2021. So the methodology included 3 greenhouse gases, which are carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide that we considered. The inventory looked at the city's vehicle fleet, building and facilities, wastewater and water, street and traffic lights, employee commute, and fugitive emissions. Some examples of the data collected were Florida power and light bills for facilities, kilowatt hour usage of lights, and vehicle miles traveled to create these calculations. Our student intern performed these calculations to determine the GHG emissions within the report for each of these sectors, and produced the 2021 inventory of government operations GHG emissions that you have in front of you. So our findings, as you can see, government vehicle fleets represents the majority of emissions, followed by streetlights and traffic signals, buildings and facilities, while employee commute, wastewater and water, and fugitive emissions account for a small portion of our emissions. The local government operations emissions inventory indicates a need for evaluating effective and efficient emissions reduction targets. With an emphasis on vehicle fleet and building and facilities, this report demonstrates the need to focus on the energy and infrastructure focus area of the city's SAP, the Sustainability Action Plan. In particular, focusing on Objective 3.1, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and 3.1.1, develop a plan for increasing the green municipal fleet, including EV, hybrid, and fuel-efficient vehicles will be integral in reducing municipal operations emissions. And continued efforts to collect and report citywide energy consumption and emissions for municipal operations will offer insight into improvements and shortcomings of reduction efforts. This has been conducted before. I believe, Eddie, you did it in the past. So this is something that we look forward to doing again with ICLEI in Audubon, Florida, and with the students that they provide. And also for the next steps from this report, I just wanted to inform you that the city is pursuing a grant with the Department of Energy to perform energy audits of city facilities, resulting in energy-related capital improvements. And this grant is funded by the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant Program. The city has already allotted a certain amount of money to do this, so we thought this was the most feasible route to take for the amount of money we would be awarded. And per the SAP, it is the intent of staff to continue monitoring the city's GHG emissions and participate in this cohort again in the future. And I know we've outlined looking at the city as a whole, so outside of just our municipal operations. So we'll see what's feasible for that in the future as we plan.
It's great. It's a good report. Member Fliss, you have a comment?
You said that Eddie's done these reports before. How do they compare over the course of years? Are we getting a little bit greener?
I don't have a comparison available. That should be the next step. But this was actually a really exciting opportunity for us because the first time we did this was data from 2019. And that was really just our first time taking a look at the municipal operations and how much greenhouse gases are being emitted due to municipal operations. So that told us something, but not a whole lot. Now we're starting to build the trend to see, are we increasing our our greenhouse gas emissions? Are they decreasing? What's the full picture? And that'll develop. Hopefully we'll get to do this opportunity again in the future.
So you don't have any idea at all?
I don't, sorry.
I got a question. Maybe I missed it, but you talked about the fleet of vehicles.
Lower your mic.
You talked about the fleet of vehicles. Did you also look at facilities such as Blue Heron and the water plant?
Yes, we did. We worked with Public Works and other departments to gather this data. Our student intern helped coordinate that. I believe if you see in the report, I don't know off the top of my head which page, if you give me one moment. If you go to page 14 of the report, well, it tells you, starting there, and as you go into the appendix of the methodology details, the data source. So we did acquire things from FPL. We've acquired things from Public Works Department. We looked at the vehicle types, the vehicle fleet that we have, our passenger cars, light trucks, things like that. We looked at Blue Heron and Osprey, and that should be outlined for you and categorized by sector that we looked at. So like wastewater and potable water, it's listed there.
Can I say something now? I think it's a great report. I mean, it's a very good summary, but I don't see a lot of detail. On page 17, or the other ones, you have assumptions, data assumptions, but it says none. Okay, so I was looking for more information. So if I look at page 14, you have government fleet vehicle fuel. It says gasoline and diesel. If you're going to, I don't see I can see it as a snapshot of where we are, but I don't see a lot of where we're going. Okay, so diesel, if you want to do something about it, then you should be using biodiesel. And I don't see anything about assumptions of what you're going to do. So if you're using diesel, then that's not nice. That's really bad. And if you're just going to, so I don't see anything here that says, oh, you're going to change things. Do you know anything about biodiesel?
So those will be the next steps. Once we identify which sectors are generating the most greenhouse gases, then we can target solutions like converting to biodiesel. Right now, this is just the 2019 data was the first time we had ever done a snapshot like this. We're really just trying to build the trend to see which sectors and are they growing or shrinking, and then we can look into solutions through the Sustainability Action Plan.
Okay, so when are we going to do a solution thing?
So just keep in mind that the scope of work for this report is done by a student intern. It is done over a semester period for them. So it's unlikely that they'll have the time to work with city staff to plan out the future. And that's where that weighs on us to consider our past reports, what we have now in front of us, where our shortcomings are. And that's where we can start to get into the weeds of how to plan and honestly implement a lot of the Sustainability Action Plan objectives, goals, and things within the implementation matrix, which was listed in the report if you look.
What page? I saw a lot of none under assumptions, so I was trying to.
What that means, none, means that there's no data gap. We were able to provide all of the data, so there are no gaps in the data. There are none.
Okay, no gaps in the data. Okay, but so the next report you're going to get paid to do, are you going to give direction of what you're going to do to fix the problem? Or is it just another snapshot?
If we're able to do the same program, it'll be another snapshot. The solutions component will come in as we start to implement the Sustainability Action Plan.
And when do we do a Sustainability Action Plan?
The Sustainability Action Plan was adopted in April of 2023 as direction by City Council, so we already have the document. There's an implementation matrix, and what I was referring to in 3.1.1, I believe, an objective in the SAP, is that we are looking to kind of switch over to electric vehicle fleet and things like that. So we have these goals, and these reports show us where our shortcomings are so that we can start implementing, going for grants that will help us implement solutions and things like that. So this report was finalized in December. So now it's like the planning phase and what we need to consider for the future now based off of this report.
Okay, so this report you did that gives plans, can we get a copy of that?
Are you asking for a copy of the ICLEI analysis?
The one she just said that says a plan.
The
You
sustainability
said there's
action
a
plan?
snapshot, and then she had another report that she was using that had a plan of what kind of fuels and stuff you're going to use.
Yes, sir.
Can we get a copy of that?
Yes, sir. The sustainability action plan is available on our website, and we can send it, send
Oh,
you a
it's
link
on the
tomorrow.
website. So all you have to do is go to the website, see that?
Yes.
Okay, so on there it'll talk about biodiesel?
No. So I don't believe biodiesel is referenced in the sustainability action plan. The idea is to continue to do these assessments to help build the case that that may be a solution that's needed to reduce the city's greenhouse gas consumption or emissions. And in order to do that next step, we would be revising the sustainability action plan to include those types of solutions. So similar to how we mentioned earlier, some of these documents are living documents where we're going to be amending them and adding new solutions. A revision to the sustainability action plan may warrant the conversion of some of our vehicles over to biodiesel if we can prove that the fleet is the largest segment of our greenhouse gas emissions.
Okay, that's good. Now, another question I have is, though it's not in your fleet or buildings, you have a building code department that makes sure building codes are followed? Okay, so if you have building codes that you're putting forth, if you look at the national building codes, they're minimum. They're minimum. They're minimum to keep you alive so you don't die. In other words, they're so minimum, they don't fix the problem. So you're saying here that we have these emissions and we have these 47% of vehicles, but see, the building code requirements, the NEC code requirements, those requirements are very minimal. In other words, they don't do anything to fix the problem. So you should be changing those codes so that they ask for zero energy homes, so that every builder and developer follows our tree plan, that every builder and developer builds zero energy homes, so that we force these people. So you need to change, so the national codes are useless in trying to solve the greenhouse gas emission problem. It's useless, okay? If you're going to solve the problems, then you need to put in there and change those codes and then make them more enhanced. So you say, we're going to use biodiesel, we're going to use zero energy homes, we're going to do all these things and make that part of your plan so that not only are your vehicles that way, but you're going to force your people to do it.
Yes, sir. Those are helpful suggestions. And when we revise the sustainability action plan, it'll come before this board. And so you have a chance to provide input such as that solution on that topic. Chairwoman, we're out of time, so we need another motion to extend the meeting.
All right, can I hear a motion to extend the meeting till 8:15?
Motion to extend till 8:15?
Second.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Does anybody else have any questions or anything? Was there a card on that?
Yes, Stan Johnson.
Eddie, when is that going to be developed, that rewrite of the plan, so that we can actually start seeing some effective changes?
Well, we just adopted the sustainability action plan, I believe, 2021, 2022. I'd have to look back. So typically on a plan cycle, we would revise a plan every 5 years. So I would expect in the next 2 to 3 years.
So we're going to go for 3 years without making any changes whatsoever to try to improve our diesel consumption or our CO2 emissions? We're
No,
just
so
taking
there are,
snapshots?
there are already suggestions in the Sustainability Action Plan that would help with the city's emissions. However, revisions of the plan typically take that long because we want to have time to be able to implement what's been suggested in the plan.
Thank you.
Stan Johnston.
Thank you for bringing up this greenhouse emission. It is important, and so other important things like the tree was important. The trees were important, and the vegetation, landscaping, and so forth. It took about an hour and a quarter for that, and so forth, and it took about maybe 10 minutes for this, which I think is also important. We got people. One boy's paralyzed right now because of, allegedly paralyzed because of that. Thank you.
Moving on, petitions and requests from the public. Stan's already spoken. I don't see anybody else, so we'll move on to reports. You have the semi-annual report in front of you. Does anybody have any additions or comments or heartburn or any reaction to the semi-annual report? I have a question about the tree technical manual. I assume that what took place today, that will not be included in the semi-annual report, or will it? It says till January 2024.
Who compiles this report these days? Okay. Sometimes the chair did it, so.
So I may be corrected on this, but I do believe any motion that happened at this meeting will be featured on the semi-annual report. I think the date of January 2024 was placed on there simply because it's presented to you today.
So the comments I just make, we should make a motion for them to be put in there? Is that what you're saying?
I thought we were referencing the tree technical manual.
So our motion that we made tonight about including all the things that Michael asked for on his motion, that will be included in this paragraph?
Correct.
Okay, great. Thank you. You guys think of any other topics that we discussed? I mean, I know we talked a lot about, but I think this pretty much captures it. I'd have to go back and look at all the agendas, but you guys see anything that's glaringly missing?
Let me try this. I don't know if it fits in this box, but we did talk about the money that is collected for the tree budget.
Oh, you mean our Gateway Funding Project?
Exactly.
I think that was during the last, I don't think
That was just recently. It was in the fall of '23. Is that
Okay.
a covered
Yeah, that was
period?
within the last 6 months.
Right. And we got some feedback on that. And basically, the feedback was that money's not available because it's going to monuments.
Right.
Not trees.
Not trees.
Yeah, not trees.
And so I don't, again, I'm just putting that out there because
Something to add.
something to add to it because it's important.
Yeah,
It is.
If we continue to do that, then it's a budget by name. But not by substance and cause.
Chairwoman, we could double check the minutes on that and make sure that that was during this timeframe from June 2023 to January 2024 and add it if that's the case. Thank you.
Yeah, so it would, I guess a bullet would just say tree mitigation fund.
Yeah, tree mitigation fund is what I'm talking about.
Needs help.
That should be there.
Yes.
That giant milestone.
Typically, it's, the semi-annual report is reporting to council on agenda items that you've discussed, so.
I believe, was that on the, it might have been on the semi-annual report prior to the dates June through January. It might have occurred at a meeting before that.
It actually occurred at the June meeting because I heard it when I was driving back from the dentist this afternoon, when I listened to the tape.
The semi-annual report's actually July to December, and then January to June. Those are the semi-annual report dates. It's July to December, January to June.
It was definitely in June when we first started talking about it.
And we've already had a couple visits that we've had on TV already. Well, not this TV, but the other TV. We had the guy with the camera over here.
Oh, yeah. Michael Lynch.
Talking Titusville. It was on the Talking Titusville. Should that be on there that we're on the Talking Titusville should be on there?
So, oh, sorry, that should be corrected then at the top of the report. There's not June 2023 to January 2024, because that's like 8 months.
It doesn't look like very many things on the list, but remember, we were not here for a bunch of months in that time period.
We went to a luau instead.
Something like that.
All right, can I, your light's on, but do you have anything else? Ah, okay. All right, so we're gonna add, the tree mitigation fund bullet and add the motion that was made tonight. Can I hear a motion to approve with those additions?
So moved with those additions.
Second.
Also, let's correct the date on it.
Yes.
Yeah, right. Okay,
Accepted.
all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye?
Any opposed?
Cards?
Are there any cards?
Yes, Dan Johnston.
You can vote after my card. You want to extend the meeting first?
Not really.
Not really.
Well, in other words, you're going to let me have 3 minutes or 5 minutes?
Then why you have 2 minutes?
Oh, I'll get 2 minutes. Well, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Because right now, there's a contradiction in what you have there on your report. On your report, it says all topics discussed. It says Hurricane Ian Baker's subdivision spill. That's what it says on there. Do you know what?
And we discussed it,
No, you didn't.
Yes, we did.
No, here's what's happened. is
We
that-
gave you a 10-minute presentation, and then we discussed it, and we've discussed it at
Okay.
subsequent meetings. So we did discuss
We
it.
made a motion.
Okay, you want to say you discussed it, but guess what? You know what the council says? The council says it never happened. Water Resources says it never happened. FDEP says it never happened. And that's what it says. On your report, you said discussed it, that it happened. Yeah, so in other words, what have you done? You asked council to do something, to recognize something, and there was no response. I want you to understand also is that when Laura Lee was talking about the erection of the fence, I was thought she was going to say there was no response, because there was no response. City, Brad Parrish and so forth, they never responded. They never came back and responded to you. The only thing that happened on that motion, it was made and it went and it disappeared. That's what I'm telling you. We know that. Well, then that's what I'm saying. It shouldn't have happened. Guys, what are you doing? Well, I'm angry at you too because you're not following up. But I thought that she said that they followed up. They didn't follow up.
I don't know whether they followed up on that or not.
They didn't.
Because I don't have a motion sheet that goes back that far, but I can definitely check on it and find out what happened. But you're right. They didn't put a fence up and they didn't acknowledge our request.
They were supposed, well, not only that, they were supposed to respond back to you, and they never did. I was at these council meetings when it happened, they never responded to Yvette's recent.
Okay.
So what I'm saying is your report is wrong. Your report is wrong.
It's
In
not
other words,
wrong.
it doesn't make sense.
We discussed the Hurricane Ian Baker subdivision sewer spill at multiple meetings. That's what it says, additional topics discussed.
Okay, so I think we can say is that the TEC failed. In other words, they discussed and admitted that it happened, and yet
You're
council
done.
doesn't admit
Your
it.
2 minutes is over,
Okay,
Stan.
thank you.
Please sit down. All right. Does anybody have a problem with the way it is now?
Yeah. We need a motion for 5 minutes to continue reports and then adjourn.
Okay, yeah. So we need 5 more minutes. Is everybody okay with that? Yeah. Because we need to discuss future items, because that's why we didn't have a meeting one time, because I didn't discuss future items, so. All right, let's vote on the report first. Is everybody okay with the report? Say aye. Aye. Okay.
Aye.
All right, now, are you okay with 5 more minutes? Yes. Okay, aye. All right. Now, we need to talk about what we want to talk about at our next meeting. Michael?
I want to add our bylaws, our charter from the city on what we're supposed to be doing, because I've got some questions about it, and I think we need to discuss it.
Okay, so this is what happened on that before. Somebody made a motion that we look at the bylaws, and the bylaws are not what we want to discuss. We want to discuss the enabling language that's in the ordinance that allows this committee to operate. So I think that's a good one, and I think that would take the whole meeting.
Yeah, we need to really discuss what we are able to do, the scope of our abilities and worth.
Yeah. I'd like to see it.
And that might answer Mr. Johnson's question also.
Thank you.
I think that's a great idea, Michael. Eddie, is there anything on the radar screen coming up, like maybe the stormwater report that we've been waiting on forever, or anything to do with changes to the wetlands in the comp plan? Or I know you guys are working on a lot of things about the comp plan. Are there any comp plan revisions that need to be on our agenda?
Yes, you will be having the environmental comp plan. We're having our first, we're working with the consultant to secure the scope of work, but that's going to be a robust public engagement opportunity that will absolutely involve the TEC. And so that'll be coming up soon. Specifically what that is excuse me, amendments to our environmental policies in our comprehensive plan.
That's great, yeah. We will really like participating in that, I'm sure. So I'm not sure what we call what we're talking about, but it's not the bylaws. It's like a couple pages. It says the TEC. That's where it says we're supposed to be in charge of the tree or the Titusville Tree City thing, and there's a bunch of other stuff. That's what we want to talk about at the next meeting.
I believe the language that you're talking about is in our land development regulations or our code of ordinances in what the city's adopted, so we can provide that to you.
Thank you very much. You guys have anything else you want to put on for the agenda for the next meeting? Okay, I think we got it then. Card. And also, under reports, is there anything else that you need to report to us?
There's an opening on the Planning and Zoning Commission. If any of the members are interested, please submit an application with the city clerk's office if you want to be the joint member.
Does a joint person have to be from the TEC, or can a P&Z member be the joint person and come to our meetings instead?
The language talking about a joint member is in the TEC's requirements, and my understanding is that it could be either way, but we could, if anyone's interested, let me know and we can look into it.
Thank you. All right, if anybody wants to be on the P and Z, here's your chance. How many times, they meet twice a month, right?
Yes.
So you'd have to be devoted, and we appreciate all of the time that you invested. We really do. It was, we're very grateful, but it involves 3 meetings a month.
I believe there's one or two members in P and Z that really have a kind of a passion I've identified. And they've exhibited an interest. One of them is Megan Moscoso. And, you know.
Don't we have an opening on the TEC right now?
Yeah, we have an alternate opening.
Okay, so the alternate could be a member that goes back and forth too, right?
Mhm.
So Megan could qualify for that then, from the P and Z, right?
Like I said, if anyone's interested, contact us and we'll look into it.
Okay, all right.
Stan has a card.
Hold the card.
Stan?
Okay, the future agenda items, I have discussed this with some people, one person on the TEC, and that I've like to have the, on the old business would be this, for example, some things that are not completed. For example, the sewage spraying, the sewage spills, the inspection of the sewage spills. I don't see that it's been, I brought this up, maybe on new business, you can put sewage inspection because it's not happening. And the thing is as far as I see, is I thought the TEC was like a checks and balances, just like I'm a checks and balances. Was that set for 5 minutes? I don't think so. What's it set for, 2 minutes?
We only extended the meeting for 5 minutes.
Okay, but you have a bylaw that says I get 5 minutes, and then you change it to 2 minutes? Just like that? Just like that? I don't like that. I don't appreciate it. But the thing is that I've even called you, Laura Lee, about the agenda. And I think that I should be allowed to speak about it because I didn't get very much from you on the phone about it because it sounds like it's a closed door because you and Brad have made decisions to close it on these issues. And the thing is that the TEC is supposed to be checks and balances. Well, you have absolutely no power. You have no checks and balances. So it continues, these sicknesses that happen, the diarrhea and the vomiting and so forth, it just continues. And the sewage spills. In other words, when you have a sewage spill, do you know who gets to report it? Do you know if you call the health department? I've called the health department numerous times and they will do nothing about the sewage spills in the city of Titusville because they are under FDEP. FDEP is their boss. And FDEP has got to tell them there's a sewage spill. That's a problem. So there's no signs put up. City doesn't put up any signs or anything on the river for some of these sewage spills. And they're supposed to even have the signs. So we're violating all kinds of laws by not having the proper procedure done. And all these guys, they're shaking they're about to wet their pants because I'm telling them, they go ahead and challenge me. They're going to the board. And you guys are what? Are standing back and, okay, I understand. So I'm asking you to put some items on the old and new business on these issues. Thank you.
Move to adjourn,
Second.
unless anybody has a report.
Oh, please.
Oh.
Never mind, motion, I'm keeping my motion.
We gonna vote?
No. We got to vote to adjourn?
We do.
All those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
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 Thank you.